Chapter 221, Ultimate Weapon. The scene of the battlefield was akin to fire mixed with water, but an existence that couldn't bear being lonely suddenly reminded me of its presence. If you're going to dig an underground tunnel to the elemental throne that's deep underground, then here's the question: which method of bulldozing is the strongest? The hell with the strongest. Always going on about digging and bulldozing. Aren't you tired of overusing this joke yet? Fine then. Ever since I reincarnated yet again, my system had been rather overactive. I was already getting tired of this same joke over and over again. Learn how to cook at New East Cuisine. Apart from not teaching how to cook using bulldozers, we have every cooking subject you can think of. In the end, you're still going with bulldozers. Do you really like this joke that much? Learn IT. It'll be easy to find a job if you go to AppTech. Specialists here will teach the newest electronic bulldozing techniques. Forget it, it's still bulldozing. There's going to be no end to this if I pay attention to you. Ignoring you, ignoring you. I decisively ended commenting to that mysterious voice. Fine, my system, as I made an effort on focusing on the problem at hand. Cough, we should all get serious. We're currently in a battle. Aren't you the only one not being serious? Indeed. Everyone else's dissatisfaction showed on their faces. Even Margaret had a complaining expression, as it was difficult for even her to control such a large-scale magic array here. This magic array was all thanks to her, and she even had to focus on controlling her cannon fodder and placing traps, dividing her attention through multitasking. I suppose that everyone else was busy fighting, but I was lazing around and talking to myself really seemed bad. But right now there was no helping it, even if I wanted to do anything about it. Immortal Lorcan was now stuck and surrounded heavily by too many people that wanted him gone. The moment he had gotten stuck, both sides of the battlefield had rushed over to him. As long as I get rid of him, I'll be the next Earth Elemental God. This was the direct type. Immortal Lorcan, it's time for my revenge for my grandfather/father/brother's death. This was the revenge type. But weren't they a bit too many? Was Immortal Lorcan so evil? If they wanted to rebel against him, couldn't they come up with any other excuses? Gulu gulu. Fine, this one couldn't even speak the common language of this world. The ones who gave it their all were most likely all the Earth Elemental Lords. Although it was quite obvious that they were saving their true power and armies just earlier, they had now sent in all their forces to rush their mutual enemy, competing to be the first to steal away Immortal Lorcan's divine soul and divine power. All the venerated elemental lords had basically gone into combat personally. Various gargoyles and semi-dragons clashed against each other in the skies, and huge creatures such as giants and earth elemental warlords were everywhere. Earth elemental creatures were typically on the large and strong side, so this was a battle that belonged to the giants. The entire continent trembled and the mountains shivered as they fought with each other. However, the Earth Elemental God was never one who had the habit of hiding and running off. Boom! Another heavy punch from Immortal Lorcan sent a tower giant flying and viciously crashing into a distant mountainside cliff, causing a large portion of the cliff to collapse. One punch from Immortal Lorcan sent everything to their deaths, with Camdion as the only exception. Immortal Lorcan used his own combat strength to show us his astonishing power. At the very least, this old dog was still filled with a mouthful of sharp teeth. Even in a heavily injured state, Immortal Lorcan was still ridiculously strong. His punch that defeated Camdion in a single blow had even slightly ripped a tear between dimensions. He had used pure physical might to break the space between dimensions. The moment I saw this scene, I unhesitatingly abandoned any thoughts of engaging him in melee combat. He used pure physical might and reached the dimensional level by breaking through between dimensions. Is this the legendary martial arts surpassing the void? If he wasn't injured, would he literally be able to battle through the heavens? Yes, this is a reference to BTTH, another Kaidian novel. One young ones, taste my dimension-tearing fist. Fine then, I won't comment on his strange naming sense, nor will I use science to analyze just how much power is required to break through dimensions with physical force alone. This clearly unreasonable fact was indisputably shown right before my eyes. Immortal Lorcan was currently using his true body, and the elemental throne was increasing his power to the point that it was nearly limitless. He was on a completely different scale here compared to his incarnation in the mortal plane. Even if Poison God Felix appeared in front of him here, I felt that Felix would die in just 2 punches. Yet no matter how strong Immortal Lorcan was, or how much the difference in power was between them, Camdion, who was also an elemental god, couldn't possibly admit defeat so easily in front of everyone watching. Camdion is so useless. He was beaten half to death by a single punch from Immortal Lorcan, and then ran off just like a coward. If such a news ended up being spread around, Camdion would be basically finished as the Wind Elemental God. Not a single Wind Elemental Lord under his command would ever follow such a leader. Taste the fury of thunderstorms. Countless amounts of thunder were summoned, transforming into arrow bolts that continuously crashed into Immortal Lorcan's head. It forcefully caused cracks to appear. It was evident that Camdion had learned from his earlier mistake and abandoned his foolish idea of engaging in melee combat with the Earth Elemental God. Instead, he decided to use long-range magic to bombard his ancient enemy. Endless amounts of rebellious Earth Elemental creatures surrounded Immortal Lorcan and kept him busy, while Camdion was in a safe faraway location summoning all sorts of thunder, which was both safe and attention-grabbing. If this allied army defeated Immortal Lorcan, Camdion could even earn a nice reputation from this little show. However, it was evident that he had still underestimated his opponent. With just an instantaneous flash movement and a slam with the force of a mountain, Immortal Lorcan actually broke the laws of physics and landed directly on top of Camdion's head. He then pounded Camdion with an extravagant series of techniques. Mountain tie pressing on top, chopping through Hua Mountain, shoulder throw, chest throw, back pin, rabbit stomping the eagle, waist throw, iron bridge, deep water explosion. I never expected that Immortal Lorcan had been a member of the wrestling league as well. You even have the spare time for running commentary? Hurry up and help out. Immortal Lorcan will be even more difficult to deal with once he breaks free. Damn it, he actually even had an instant movement ability. Amelia was in a very bad mood. When she heard that Immortal Lorcan was an expert in melee combat, she had intended to face him head-on as she was also similarly skilled in this aspect, but now that she had seen his expert martial arts skills, she knew that she had no chance of victory. Relax, the larger the mass, the more energy it takes to make it move instantaneously. If he could use his instant movement ability as he pleased, he would have long since gotten rid of Cade, who's casting that forbidden spell. And since he's heavily injured, at least he won't have the energy to sustain his maximum output for very long. You think I'm worried? None of this matters to me whether this is a win or a loss. I'm just curious how he reached this level of physical power. When we defeat him, I'm going to take part of his muscle structure as my research material. Give me at least an arm or a leg. If you don't agree, I'm going to go on strike right here and now. Fine then. I was incredibly mistaken to even think that Amelia could have been worried about me and the combat situation. This was the witch's true nature. Your assumption was correct. Immortal Lorcan indeed became weaker after using instant movement. As I expected, even if Camdion was getting beaten up, he actually wasn't injured as heavily as the one punch from earlier. He wasn't even defeated yet. He even had the spare time to occasionally counterattack. However, watching my ally get beaten up was no winning method, which was why I activated the next step of my plan earlier than originally planned. Bei Feng, are you not ready yet? What I heard through my gnome-provided communication device was a certain individual's advertisement. Bulldozing. Who's the best? Who's the best? Find Bei Feng of the Gentleman Alliance. And you can also fulfill your dream of immigrating to East Mist for the low price of 998. That's right, 998. You didn't hear wrong. It's not 8,888 Oregon 88888. For merely 998, you can learn Bei Feng's secret techniques of bulldozing beast taming. Do you all love bulldozers that much? Will this joke ever end? After my angry roaring, he finally quieted down, with only the sounds of digging to be heard. Your Highness, it's rather dark underground. I was just singing to keep my morale up. Only a while later did I hear the sound of Bei Feng attempting to explain to me. HMPH. I thought that you were having too much fun with those giant sandworms and forgot your task. Did you invent some new method to have fun? Were you too busy having fun? Should I apologize for interrupting your fun? Hey, don't fall silent at this time. Could it be that I was actually right about my guess? Hey, Say something. This is making me really uncomfortable. Fine then, let's not care too much about the little details as long as it involves Bai Feng, otherwise, this book will get banned sooner or later for indecency. But, Bai Feng quickly gave me a report. Immortal Lorcan's old nest was being protected by his divine power. Incredibly hard stone layers caused the sandworm's digging to progress rather slowly, and time would be necessary. The only part to celebrate about it was that since we didn't take the underground labyrinth this time, instead digging straight to our goal, we already avoided many traps and obstacles. The only obstacle remaining was the ridiculously tough stone layers. In fact, I had used this distraction tactic against Immortal Lorcan before already, but who cared? A strategy was fine as long as it worked. I now know the approximate location of the elemental throne. It's about 300 meters underground. But the closer we get, the denser the earth element becomes. It's going to take some time to reach it by digging. 300 meters? It's about what we expected. How long will it take you to reach there? Probably about 2 or so hours. I took a glance at Immortal Lorcan, who was currently giving us a show of fighting a tiger while empty-handed, and helplessly shook my head. If I really waited for 2 hours, perhaps all of our allies would be dead. There's not enough time. Activate Plan B. Are we really going to activate Plan B? That Plan B is a little too risky. I'm certain about it. Hurry up and activate it. Are you sure? Can't you reconsider? It's too dangerous. We must use it. It's the best method for us currently, not to mention this plan isn't dangerous at all. At such a critical moment, time is of the essence, so why are you just hemming and hawing here? After a moment of silence, I thought that he was beginning to put my plan into action, but I didn't expect that he spoke up again in a sheepish tone. Just what exactly is Plan B? There were too many words, so I didn't read it earlier. And it is too dark underground, so I didn't read it now. I just turned on a light, but now I can find it. I probably accidentally fed the plan to one of my little cuties. I almost smashed the gnome communication device to pieces right then and there. You said all that just in order to cover up the fact that you forgot what Plan B was? You fed it to your little cutie? Why don't you feed yourself? It was an incredible mistake on my part to even think that you were thinking about any potential consequences of Plan B. Just you wait, when you come out, at $Y%. Never has anyone in history ever been able to so easily incite my anger. No wonder town security treated eating, sleeping, and beating up Bai Feng as their daily schedule, as this bastard was just too skilled at making others angry. Fine, no matter how angry I was, it was impossible for me to beat that guy up through the communication device, and I still needed him in the future. Since that bastard forgot what the plan was, then I would just have to explain it to him. Move in an arc and ascertain the elemental throne's coordinates for me. I gave a huge sigh after telling him my plan. After we return to the mortal plane, I'm going to lock Bai Feng into an exotic creature zoo as an exhibit. That bastard definitely meets the standard for being an exotic creature. Are you sure that it won't be a reward instead of a punishment? Amelia's reminder caused me to fall silent. A moment later, I came to a decision. In that case, I'll send him over to the Grey Elves to help them in their reconstruction. There's plenty of elven beauties there, and so many people want to go, but I feel that with only elven beauties next to him, but the land there being so barren that not even a rabbit can be found, only that will be the most fearsome punishment of all for that bastard. Your Highness, please don't. I'll immediately carry out Plan B. I promise that I'll carry out your request with high quality and efficiency. Please don't send me to hell. If you truly insist, I prefer to remain in the Earth elemental plane. The communication device was still turned on, and Bai Feng was already begging for mercy. This man who took the path never traveled actually had something he feared after all. A wonderful job that countless youngsters in the prime of youth would dream for was actually a nightmare in his eyes, and he was even willing to stay behind in this hellish earth elemental plane. Didn't you say that this world was hell to you? Before I even finished my sentence, I instantly recalled how, when I saw him last, there were so many strange-shaped creatures following him that he could open up an Earth Elemental Creature Museum. Just inferring a little at what he intended to do caused me to want to stop inferring entirely about this matter. Shut up and work hard. Otherwise, I'll send you to a heaven where there's only female elven beauties. Why does this sound so wrong? And, currently, above our heads, A shadow had covered the battlefield below us, as a gigantic object was slowly moving. Is that a bird? A dwarven helicopter? It's Superman. No, it's a huge duck. Yep, this was the core of my plan B. The ultimate yellow duck. The creation of the moving fortress Ultimate Yellow Duck was personally led by the great sculptor Rainslow. Countless tower giants had worked on it. It was tremendous to the point that those gazing upon it from the ground could mistake it for a huge floating island. Although there hadn't been enough time for it to be equipped with weapons, just a characteristic of its tremendous size made it impossible to block. No matter what obstacles were in the way, it would reach its destination. And, for it to be used directly like this, it was waiting in midair, awaiting my orders. Boom. The gigantic moving fortress's appearance changed the combat situation entirely. Its ferocious appearance shocked every single eyewitness, and even Immortal Lorcan was rather shocked to see it. And when he noticed just where the duck had landed, he used his instant movement ability again to attempt to stop it. And, just as I expected, the ultimate yellow duck landed and stuck its legs into the ground as it spread its wings. It suddenly opened its huge mouth and let out an angry roar. Woof! At that moment, everyone on the battlefield paused for a moment. Perhaps it should be said that nobody expected a duck to make such a sound. Amelia kept shaking her head. What amazing and astonishing design. Did you think I would say something like that? Roland, this must be your terrible interest at work again. Are you intending to embarrass yourself in multiple planes now? HMPH. Foolish mortals shall never understand the marvelous designs of geniuses. Watch, this is only the beginning. The ultimate yellow duck's tremendous feet were solidly planted into the ground as support, and its spread wings meant they would help shift its center of gravity. Its upper half, which was beginning to tilt, was actually the best balancing mechanism. Suddenly, it bent over and mightily chucked the ground. Smash! The ultimate yellow duck ate some dirt, then spat out the dirt, then ate some more dirt, and spat the dirt out again. You bastard! Acting so pretentious. It was just a bulldozer again. Ah, why did I say again? Adam's comment said what everyone was obviously thinking. They were all nodding. Learn bulldozing. Which school is the best? At this moment, the system couldn't help but pop out again. Ever since I made this plan B, it wouldn't stop with the bulldozer jokes. That's enough. This is the ultimate yellow duck, an ultimate weapon and moving fortress, not some bulldozer. Note 1. Yes. This is a reference to BTTH, another Kadian novel. Chapter 222, Ace. Although it seemed like I was just messing around, this was actually the cruelest plan to kill Immortal Lorcan. He was already stuck between a rock and a hard place. The waves from the forbidden spell in front of him kept increasing in magnitude, while the yellow giant strange monster was digging into his old nest. It seemed that going forward or backward would be nothing but death for him. And as for his allies, they were unreliable. Not even the strongest of contracts could stand up to the test of time. Die for the sake of an ancestor's contract? Nobody was so foolish. The giant sandworms ran off after just a few minutes of fighting, while the sand dragons and stone giants also noticed that their opponents were difficult to deal with, and they began simply watching the battlefield. Very few of them were giving it their all. Immortal Lorcan had left for far too long, and thousands of years had passed. His most trusted followers were long gone. If he had enough time, 300 years, no, even 30 years, he had full confidence that he would be able to create a faction that was truly his own again, here to act as his subordinates. Unfortunately, how could I possibly give you time? Am I foolish enough to raise a tiger that will eat me? Of course, I knew what Immortal Lorcan was thinking about. In a way, we were the same type. Those who weren't exactly magnanimous, who absolutely had to repay a grudge or else we wouldn't be able to sleep well at night unless we got rid of our enemies completely. Why don't you just say that you're a small-hearted person who will bear a grudge until the end of the world? By the way, is it really alright for the main character to be someone as unrighteous as you? You're even an epic hero? Were the historians blind? You should be the antagonist. Shut up. I forced myself to suppress my anger. My system was definitely being too overactive recently, especially right after it rebooted. It kept finding opportunities to tick me off. If I kept commenting, That would make me fall right into my system's trap. From a certain standpoint, my system wasn't wrong. I was indeed the small-hearted type who would bear a grudge forever. I still remembered the fresh blood on the snowy white battlefield along with all the dying words of the Mist Warriors as if it were yesterday. How could I possibly relax until Immortal Lorcan was dead for real? Checkmate. I'm attacking your weakness, the elemental throne, from two sides. Let me see just which side you choose to defend. Do you think your son Wukong, with the ability to split yourself? One, and when I witnessed what happened next, I spat out a mouthful of blood. I had actually jinxed myself. The huge stone giant twisted himself and actually sent out 3 smaller stone giants that started running in 2 different directions. And, as they ran, those stone giants absorbed the earth element in order to strengthen themselves, enlarge, and split again. After just a short 10 seconds, 30-something more Immortal Lorcans had appeared. Impossible. How are we supposed to deal with so many earth elemental gods? Someone was panicking now. It's definitely not impossible. If each clone had power equaling Immortal Lorcans, he would have used this technique long ago. No, even if each clone had only half his power, we would have lost long ago. It's nothing more than a wild fantasy to think that he could win. This person was slightly calmer, but his continually trembling legs betrayed his inner fear. Humans are born from humans, beasts are born from beasts, and even elemental creatures have elemental creature parents, but I just want to ask, Immortal Lorcan, what's your mother's name? I was viciously insulting him now. Although I seemed to be prattling on about nothing, my question was actually the most painful insult to elemental creatures of all. I asked this due to my understanding of what had happened in front of me, and it was also my way of showing my condescension towards Immortal Lorcan. Apart from the top-level elemental creatures that could transform into humanoid forms, normal elemental creatures didn't have genders at all. It was national that they also didn't have reproduction methods similar to species with genders. Their reproduction was just like lower-level life forms, with copying and division as their main methods. That was why it was quite common for earth elemental creatures to split off part of their bodies to create clones of themselves. It was a common ability. However, these simple clones wouldn't have wills of their own and would be nothing more than manipulated puppets. In order to create a new life and new will, which would be true reproduction, the earth elemental creature would need to split its soul and also give up approximately half of its power. Of course, places with high elemental density could produce low-level elemental creatures naturally as well. More than 90% of the elemental life forms in the elemental planes were just low-level elemental creatures that followed their instincts. They lacked knowledge and wisdom. They would naturally split off once in a while and replenish their strength again by absorbing the earth element. Meanwhile, things would be a little more difficult for high-level elemental creatures. Every time it was time to naturally split off, that would be when the elemental life form was at its weakest. High-level elemental creatures also had their own instincts to split off and reproduce, which were quite difficult to control. If the timing to split themselves was a bad one, and an enemy just happened to come looking. This was why the older elemental lords would always suppress their basic instincts to split and reproduce as much as they possibly could. If they failed to suppress their instincts and ended up producing a younger clone, they were highly likely to be attacked by their enemies and die right then and there. In order to prevent their enemies from finding out about their weak periods, some elemental lords with no moral limitations whatsoever would unhesitatingly devour their younger clones that just split off from them. This would result in not only replenishing their power loss that just occurred, but it would even greatly increase their overall strength. From a certain standpoint, every single high-level elemental creature that was born with intelligence was highly likely to face their own parent as its first enemy. Back when there were only elemental creatures, all of them viewed this type of action as a normal course of survival. But after coming into contact with the outside world and obtaining an understanding of the morality of the outside world, high-level elemental creatures started treating devouring their own children as a taboo. Asking who an elemental creature's parent was no different from asking how he managed to kill his parent and survive. We investigated a tremendous amount of information in the library. Every one of us was certain that Immortal Lorcan would have the basic elemental ability to send out clones of himself. This was a basic instinct of all elemental creatures, and moreover, There were even records of a Myrtle appearing in different places at the same time. The most I've ever seen was 3 Myrtle at the same time. Every one of them had incredible strength. And the strange part was, even destroying one of them didn't seem to have any effect on his main body at all. It was as if there was no connection between them. Those were Camdian's words. Based on this, we made many inferences. We speculated whether Myrtle was actually a triplet, if he had several sons that worked together with him as a father and son team, or if his natural talent was in creating clones. There were several hundred such inferences. However, all of them were shattered by the truth before us. Every Myrtle had very similar but different wavelengths from the original and had their own sources of magic power. It was obvious that they weren't his clones. It was as if they are his own children. Those wavelengths are basically just like a clone's. There's only one possible explanation of this. He devoured his own split-off children, transformed them into his own clones, and has been carrying them on him all along, intending to use them as consumable items at a critical moment. What difference is this from the foolish ogres? No, not even the ogres eat their own species, especially their own children. The water elemental goddess Alos had a face filled with fatigue after finishing her magical traps. Now, however, her face was filled with condescension for Myrtle. Not every elemental creature lacked morality, and as Sidon War's wife, Alos had many children of her own. Although most of her children had already passed on, she also experienced emotions and a life similar to most living creatures. She was filled with distaste for Myrtle actions. Even if we all looked down on and were filled with distaste for Myrtle, there was a cruel fact in front of us. Our opponent was even stronger than we anticipated. Due to the difference in age, there were gigantic differences in the power levels of these 30-something younger Myrtle. The strongest one was only about 1/3 of a Myrtle power level, while the weakest was probably only at the level of a slightly strong elemental lord. However, when a Myrtle power level was being used as the basis of comparison, this was already a significant number, especially since they were all clones of a master monk martial expert. They all had nigh indestructible bodies, akin to unstoppable freight trains. Although they possessed their own bodies, they were all under the control of a Myrtle will. They split into 2 groups consisting of approximately 17 or 18 each as they broke free from the surrounding armies. They displayed their well-practiced combat cooperation techniques, with some of them performing flying kicks, punches, and body slams. Each had their own role and complemented each other, which instantly helped them break free from the heavy numbers around them. The 18 monks formation? Does he intend to shoot a kung fu movie? Just how old is this strategy supposed to be? Some tried to stop these Myrtle that were breaking free, but they would always mysteriously die off. We, however, were at a height to watch over the entire battlefield, and it was only us who could see the shadow of an instant flash behind those people. How shameless! Forget about hiding among his own clones. He's even ambushing those much weaker than he is. Should I say that being shameless was the way to true strength? That 18 monks formation seemed strong already, but the worst part of it was that Myrtle himself was now hiding his true strength and acting as if he had strength equal to that of his clones. Anyone who fought with him would instantly get pulverized before he would somehow manage to hide among his clones again. It's indeed quite strong, but it's still meaningless to us. Clap. With my indication, the pre-prepared trap is activated. Numerous catapults were brought out, but they were tossing out green barrels rather than stones. Crack! Crack! All these barrels exploded, causing pitch black oil to be spread everywhere before being lit up. This was alchemic oil that I had gotten from the gnomes. The roaring flames transformed into a furious mountain of fire and swallowed up the surroundings. Thanks to the oil, the endless seas of fire devoured everything. Soon, with some angry shouting, the flames were put out. What appeared amongst the flames were numerous pitch-black figures, and when I counted them, there wasn't even a single less Myrtle than before. A fire like this would definitely be fatal to any mortal, and it would even be slightly bothersome to an elemental lord, but for Myrtle and his clones, this type of low-strength non-magical fire could be directly ignored. The only result that came of it was that their bodies' surface temperatures increased slightly and their faces were blackened by the smoke. However, I laughed at this, because them ignoring it was the best result for me. Clap. I gave another indication for the next step of the plan. How could it be possible for the water elemental goddess to be so fatigued from just a single trap? Another flood fell upon the battlefield again, and a mudflow caught all the Imridalorcans within it. This was indeed a trap that had nothing new about it whatsoever, but it was fine as long as it was useful. This specially made trap I designed for Imridalorcan who had ridiculous physical strength was indeed highly effective against him. Ice. I added my ice magic to the trap again and directly froze them in the ice. Roar. The angrily roaring Imridalorcan instantly broke free from the ice. This type of attack had basically zero attack power against him, and he felt like all it did was help him cool off. However, it angered him quite greatly. In his mind, these attacks were no different from pranks and were basically an insult to him. Clap. I responded by having several hundred green barrels of oil sent over to Imridalorcan and his clones once more, and soon a roaring fire covered them again. Once again, there was no difference in the oil I used this time and last time. The result was also similar to last time, as soon, a bunch of stone giants with angry faces emerged from the flames. However, after this, there was something slightly different. Crack. The sound of rocks shattering on this battlefield didn't mean much. But for me, who had long been waiting for this moment, it was a heaven-sent sound. Clap. I had Alos send yet another flood. Ice. I froze them yet again. Clap. Yet another sea of fire engulfed them. Crack. Crack. This time, the sounds of stones cracking were obvious for all to hear. Many of the stone giants were already cracked all over. One of the youngest Imridalorcans collapsed at this point. He immediately shattered and turned into white broken rocks, ending his long life as a puppet. Impossible. This type of attack couldn't possibly pierce through our magical defense. Seeing my old opponent angrily roar in such astonishment greatly uplifted my mood. HMPH. Does this have anything to do with magical defense? This is just the expansion of objects that are heated and the contraction of objects that are frozen during sudden temperature differences. Stones will easily become fragile and shatter under repeated temperature changes between extreme heat and cold, which is one of the basic laws of physics. If you have the ability, then why don't you try changing this natural law as well? Clap. Well, although Imridalorcan was asking, I wasn't as stupid as to explain it to my enemy on the battlefield. Since this was an effective method, I just thought the above to myself, continued to profit at his expense and decided to continue with this strategy. After another round of ice and fire, 5 more Imridalorcans collapsed. Clap. After several repetitions of this process, there were only less than half of the Imridalorcans remaining, and Imridalorcan himself had long since abandoned trying to conceal himself among his clones and was trying to break free at all costs. Yet Thunder Eagles, formed from thunder, blocked him as the furious Camdian tossed thunderbolts at Imridalorcan from behind, suppressing him. The meat shield known as Adam was also deployed at this critical junction to control the situation. Clap. With this round, about 10 more Imridalorcans perished. Clap. After 3 more rounds, only Imridalorcan himself was still standing. All the clones he had been saving up for the past several tens of thousands of years had been destroyed in an instant, and his white jade-like body was now cracked all over. The powerful Imridalorcan seemed like he was forced to the brink, but his eyes glared viciously at us and shows that he was still far from giving up. Although pulling all the grunts together for an AO attack was quite nice, the AO still lacked effective power against the boss. It seems that he won't be so easily dealt with after all. Boom. Still, the continuously digging ultimate yellow duck man that time was on our side, as it would force Imridalorcan to use everything against us, no matter what aces they were. Come, I shall allow you to witness just what is a mage's deceit and shamelessness. Cough, cough, I made a mistake. I meant to say a mage's knowledge and wisdom. Seeing Margaret and Amelia suddenly glare angrily in my direction, I managed to change my words in time. Well, you finally managed to use modern knowledge from your world to your advantage against one of this world's residents. You're doing something that a transmigrator should. Is there a reward? A title or fate points? Wonderful, you're finally doing something that a system should. I believe that in just a short amount of time, I'll level up, be fully outfitted with god equipment, become the biggest boss of all, marry someone beautiful and rich, and reach the peak of my life. It's exciting to just think about it, Let me sing this song for you. Actually, I've prepared this song many years ago already. Time for the transmigrator trumpets to sound. We transmigrators have our strength, this strength is iron, this strength is steel. Fine then, it was too silly of me to have any expectations of the system. Shut up. Your singing is even worse than Graia's. For insulting the system, 100 fate points have been deducted. This is the first time you've deducted points from me. You actually had such an ability? Are you that pissed off at hearing me say your singing sucks? Note 1. According to Wikipedia, Sun Wukong, also known as the Monkey King, is a mythological figure who features in a body of legends, which can be traced back to the period of the Song dynasty. He appears as the main character in the 16th century Chinese classical novel Journey to the West. Chapter 223, The Earth Elemental God's Rebellious Children. During the time we had to prepare before combat, we had countless discussions. Elemental clones from splitting, destroy them with temperature differences between hot and cold. Diamond-like impenetrable body, that's possible. Adjusting his own elemental structure and transforming into a harder substance seems likelier and likelier the more I think about it. What should we do in that case? Diamond-like structures are actually easy to deal with. Their solid structures also mean that they're more afraid of structural change. Temperature differences will change the structure, as it typically won't be able to stand up to high heat. We'll just have to bake the entire battlefield. I'll go find the gnomes and prepare some extra top-level oil. Is transforming into a tremendous giant possible? Don't the final bosses in stories always suddenly have a bigger form at the end? Ren, you should really read less of those unreliable books about legends and knights. Although larger bodies can increase physical power, speed and reaction time will definitely be decreased. Suddenly enlarging himself on the battlefield will only make him into a bigger target, and if the total physical mass doesn't change, it will take a huge amount of energy to recreate and reshape the body. Just how foolish would someone have to be to do this? But just for insurance, let's install a self-destruct mechanism on the ultimate yellow duck. Let's leave the self-destruct mechanism up to the gnomes as well. I feel that he might have the ability to move at high speed within the ground. There are spells that resemble dimension doors in intermediate earth magic. Okay, then let's prepare some extra gnome mines, as well as inject large amounts of lead bromide and mercurous sulfide into the ground where the earth elemental god will move within. Is that useful? Extremely useful. Anything that comes into contact with lead bromide will be unable to use any type of dimensional magic. As for mercurous sulfide, it has the nickname of poison of the earth. Just a single gram can decompose an earth elemental. If Imrudalorcan really intends to move through an area of ground that's filled with mercurous sulfide, hey, what other abilities could he possibly have? Let's consider it some more. Oh right. Can we prepare an anti-gravity trap? We have tons of earth mages anyways, and as long as we can reduce gravity to zero, with Imrudalorcan's huge mass, I refuse to believe that he'll be able to stand anymore. If it was a warrior's discussion, it probably wouldn't take even 10 minutes before the discussion devolved into go slice that bastard up. Let's go over there to slice that bastard up, and after killing him, where should we all go to celebrate, a bar or a barbecue? They wouldn't even consider what to do in case they lost. What, you're asking what to do in case we lose? You dare to shake our morale? Execute him. Strength and glory, blood and thunder. By the way, is this slogan really fine? It sounds like the slogan for feeding. One at the very least, add in something strategic that uses brains. And if it was a group of mages having a discussion instead, then the discussion would actually take far longer than the actual length of the battle they were planning for. It was very common to prepare for at least 2 weeks for a single battle, and while the endless discussions were rather boring, they were typically quite effective. As long as the enemy was confirmed and there was plenty of time available, they would research everything about their enemy's weaknesses and strengths, making several or even dozens of plans against their enemy. If they met the enemy as planned at the location and time that they wanted, then the result was usually a foregone conclusion. Before us, currently, was such a typical battle of mages abusing a melee warrior. Ah, that guy really did go underground. He ran into all the gnome mines. Look, he came out. Ha ha. He's green and black all over from the lead bromide and mercurous sulfide, so pitiful. He changed his form. His white jade transformed into diamond. What a pity, why is it black diamond? As expected, all those that act like rich pay-to-win players will turn into poor free-to-play players in the next second. Those rich pay-to-win players should all go die. You don't understand? There's no need to understand, it's professional vocabulary. The anti-gravity trap has been activated. Wow! He actually flew up into the sky like a balloon. He's dropping, he's dropping. Hurry up and have the cannon fodder escape. That bastard's about to use instant movement again. Use the 200-dimensional anchors on him, fire. Ha ha. That guy only managed to teleport his upper half, he's now in 2 pieces. Oh, he actually managed to put himself together again. He's as disgusting to deal with as a lizard. Ren was breaking out into a cold sweat all over as she listened to these mages joyously discussing the calamities that befell Immortal Lorcan. For the first time, she wondered if she had chosen the wrong job class. Immortal Lorcan, who was basically undefeatable in melee combat, was actually being toyed with like this. At this moment, she couldn't help but think of some classical phrases in this world. In mages' eyes, there are only 2 job classes in the world: mages, and cannon fodders A, B, C, and D. Never ever fight a mage in a battlefield where he's had sufficient time to prepare beforehand. Otherwise, you won't even know how you died. Pay special attention to this part. Never attack a mage's personal mage tower. With all his resources available and dozens of years of preparation, he'll easily be able to have over 10 times his normal combat strength at his fingertips. As a pure warrior, the first reaction you should have upon seeing an enemy mage is to rush him and slice him to death. Either cut him down instantly or be toyed by him to death after he recovers from the attack. It's your choice. Mages are just like firstborn sons. It's unfair. I'm sorry, there has never been anything such as fairness in this world. Why don't you consider how it's many times, even dozens of times tougher for mages to level up compared to other job classes? And you think that obtaining knowledge in order to level up is the same difficulty as wielding your fists to level up? Do you know how many mages get stuck at silver rank? Over 99%. You want to defeat a high-ranked mage? Change the combat situation to an ambush or guerrilla warfare. You want to rush him from the front? What's your name? Why am I asking your name? Well, I was considering what to write on your tombstone. How about the 1008th idiot who rushed to his death? In fact, at this moment, Ren even wanted to ask Roland to help her change her job class. After all, Roland had succeeded before in cultivating across both these job classes. After some hesitation, she finally recalled another incident where she asked Harlois to teach her magic in the past, but helplessly gave up almost immediately. You want to learn magic from me? Okay, as long as you pass this test, I'll teach you. Try some high-level math with this calculus and derivatives. If you don't understand, you'll understand as you look through it. Relax, it's not that difficult. Roland was the one who invented it, and he often uses this to train his logical thinking ability. We also intend to spread this through the entire magical world, and it's being received quite well. As long as you can understand calculus and derivatives, it's evidence that you have the necessary talent, and I'll teach you real magic. At first, Ren was filled with hope as she took 2 classes which filled her head with numbers and symbols, and the more she listened the dizzier her head got. In the end, she even fainted in class, right in the middle. What a waste of my time. To use that bastard Roland's quote, idiots who don't even have 9 intelligence should have some self-awareness and just go serve as cannon fodder. Harlois' assessment of Ren had made her quite displeased at the time, but she felt that she would rather continue practicing the sword than start learning magic with that ridiculous math. Besides, the power of chaos wouldn't be weaker than the power of mages. It was, actually, the opposite. The power of chaos came straight from the source and was maybe even stronger. However, right now, as Ren watched Roland, Amelia, and the other mages having fun with their discussion, she felt an inexplicable pang of displeasure. Her heart suddenly trembled as the tremendous power of chaos ran through her bloodstream. Indeed, I have no need to be jealous of them. I have my own path as well. Demons look down on using traps and investigations, and they are still undefeatable, anyways. Carwin's teachings suddenly rang in her ears. From the very moment that logic was used to explain elemental power, Elemental magic was destined to have nothing to do with chaos. Controlling chaos never required logic to begin with. Willpower is the important part. You can think of its power as your citizen, and all you need to do is utilize your will as a chaos lord. Who cares what the citizen thinks? I can observe it, so it exists. I want this to happen, so it did. As for why, it was never important to begin with. The more stubborn and resolute someone's personality is about this, the more suitable they are to control chaos, which is why Roland is no good. He's too logical, he has to research everything about everything, but you're similar to me. You seem to be the logical type, but you're actually incredibly selfish and willful, the perfect natural-born type to become a chaos lord, the perfect natural-born type to control chaos. Ren clutched her hands as the Prince of Chaos gave her the special ability to control chaos, and the endless void furnished her with limitless power. Pitch black corruption seeped out through a dimensional tear. That was the most basic source of power for all the planes. The original power of chaos began distorting this space. Under the mysterious guidance of her willpower, Ren began muttering an incantation in a low voice as she glanced over at Immortal Lorcan's children that had already perished. Pitiful children, I can feel your rage and helplessness. You were stripped of your right to survival rights as you were born. Could there be anything crueler in this world? Getting devoured instantly by your father after being born in this beautiful world. Could there be anything reviled more in this world? I, Rankin Mist, representative of chaos, shall give you all one more chance. Become my slaves for a chance at revenge. Come, children. If you're unwilling to remain like this, give over your souls filled with rage and unwillingness to me. Let chaos build new bodies for you. Ren's hands descended, not a single speck of light surrounded them. At this moment, some certain natural laws had begun to be distorted. The semi-god mages instantly looked at her in astonishment. Since they were abnormally sensitive to the elemental tide to begin with, how could they possibly not notice this obvious power of chaos? Ren finally regained her senses and rubbed the back of her head, not knowing what to do or what an incredible thing she had accomplished. What did I just do? Nevertheless, the power of chaos had twisted the natural laws of life and death. These elemental children should have turned into elemental shards and returned to the earth elemental plane, but instead, they now gathered together again. Their tattered bodies began piecing themselves together with each other, and those souls, which filled with hatred, combined with the power of chaos and revived those souls that had already perished. The distorted, rebellious children of the earth elemental god managed to stand up again. Judging by their physical appearances, they seemed to be stone giants that were haphazardly pieced together. Their bodies were filled with triangular snow-white crystals, and each of them had been pieced together using at least 2 or 3 of Immortal Lorcan's children's bodies. Having a distorted shape, like 6 hands or 8 legs, was common for them, and all of the numerous elemental eyes on their bodies were wide open. Deep hatred shone from within their dusky yellow eyes, as if they couldn't accept their deaths. Ren's pure power of chaos had only acted as the glue and catalyst. What helped these unexistable existences return to this world were these children's hatred and rage at Immortal Lorcan and by extension, this world. I hate you. I hate my father. I hate everything in this world. I curse this world that gave me my life. Just looking at them would cause words of hate to furiously roar in one's mind, and mortals with weaker willpower would instantly become insane. These 7 pieced together, mixed giants were now living embodiments of hatred. The entire continent was shaking as if it was making sounds of grief and pain. Thunder gathered in the clouds as the furious earth elemental plane began cursing what had just happened. Pitch black clouds covered the lands. It was as if it couldn't bear to witness this. It was unable to tolerate its own favorite child transforming into an existence that was cursed by all the gods. This is the reaction of distorted divine power, which, according to the Dimensional Encyclopedia, is known as negative divine power. This power can only exist in one type of life form. Margaret adjusted her eyeglasses, but her expression was filled with astonishment, which was incredibly rare for her. She immediately sent Adam a message to immediately retreat back to us. If her expectations were correct, the upcoming battle was going to be far more dangerous, even more so than facing Immortal Lorcan head-on. Actually, Adam didn't need her command. He had always possessed sharp combat senses. When he saw Immortal Lorcan turn around and run off like a frightened rabbit, Adam instantly ran away at a speed faster than even the wind elemental god. Amazing. I'm actually able to meet such a rare species. Where's my notebook? I need to record this. Amelia's reaction made everyone feel as helpless as usual. This is wonderful. I'm having so many ideas now for the birth of my new 7 virtues. Fine then, let us ignore this maniacal witch who had exposed her true form and couldn't stop herself from cackling. No matter what, Immortal Lorcan counts as a god, and these children are divine children that did not want to be born. Under the influence of the power of chaos, their divine power has become negative, and all the conditions have been met. There's no mistaking it. Just like Shadow, they are a new species of creature cursed by all the gods. Divine sins. Divine sins were mistakes that shouldn't exist and were created from unexpected side effects of divine power. As souls that had already perished, divine sins continued to live. They absorbed nutrition using their negative divine power empowered by pure hatred for their god ancestors and everything natural. The uncontrollable divine sins were cursed and hated by the gods, as well as feared. Yes, they had power that even their ancestors, the gods, feared, and in fact, they even had powers that countered the gods they came from. When facing a true divine sin, please treat it as an existence on par with a true evil god, otherwise, one would be certain to die. As the result of Immortal Lorcan's self-deserving actions and the guidance of the will of chaos, these so-called rebellious children of the earth elemental god divine sins came into this world. All of their gazes locked onto their own father, eyes filled with hatred. Their wide-open mouths were evidence of their desire for delicious food. Divine sins are mistaken existences that shouldn't exist. All mages not at the semi-god level retreat right away. If any of them see you, it'll be too late already. Luckily, there is an almost zero chance to meet one, and if you really do, well, that's just too bad for you. I finally understand why the monster compendium said that about them. This species is just too dangerous. Unlike normal elemental creatures, which receive support and replenishment from the earth elemental plane, the divine sins obtained elemental power through heartless robbery. All the earth elemental creatures in their surroundings were beginning to naturally disappear, with the tall tower giants instantly becoming shattered heaps of rubble. Even the powerful sand dragons became nothing more than dried salamanders. Who knew what other powers these divine sins possessed, but just their very existences had the side effect of becoming the natural enemy of all earth elemental creatures. They were born due to their hatred for Immortal Lorcan, and had the same source of power as Immortal Lorcan. As the divine sins born from him, they were doubtlessly Immortal Lorcan's greatest natural enemy. The instant they appeared on the battlefield, all the earth elemental lords began to escape at top speed. That was the fear that frogs would instinctively have for snakes. In front of their natural enemy, they were nothing more than potential food. The next moment, those raging 7 divine sin brothers began a life and death battle with their father. Hey, Roland, even such a thing has come out. How do you intend to clean up afterwards? These things are even more dangerous than Immortal Lorcan. Shall we escape together back to the mortal plane as soon as we finish this battle? Don't interrupt my thinking. I'm considering something really important right now. Do you have a way to control divine sins? This is a new topic that nobody has ever succeeded in before. Should I apply for research funds and a class on this topic from the Truth Symposium? No. Who could possibly control those things? I was just thinking about what name to give them. What do you all think of the 7 brothers of the gourd? The one with 8 eyes will be the big brother, the one with the shiniest eyes will be the second brother, the one that seems incredibly hard will be the third brother, the one that's been roasted red will be the fourth brother, the one with traces of water still on him will be the fifth brother, the smallest one that seems to lack presence will be the sixth brother, and the one with the gourd-like rock on its back will be the 7th brother. Hey, why are you all leaving? You don't like these names? I won't even bother making fun of you here. Do you really think that the residents of this world can understand your jokes from China of your original world? These jokes are too old. Anyways, you're exposing your true age with how ancient they are. Too, I wasn't joking around. I was being serious. Then that's even more pitiful. No, even scarier. Your talent for naming is just as garbage as it's always been. Shut up. Someone who can't carry a tone doesn't have the right to hog the microphone. Brothers of the gourd, Brothers of the gourd. 7 flowers growing on the same vine. Whether the wind blows or the rain falls, they fear nothing. Blah. Ah, you're completely off tune. Are you trying to force me to death due to obsessive compulsive disorder? Just kill me already. Note: 1. Game vocabulary that means to give the enemy many kills due to a lack of skill. 2. The 7 Brothers of the Gourd is a several decades old Chinese children's story. Chapter 224, Challenge. Everything is the result of karma. Even simple acts, such as eating and drinking, are predetermined, and one's actions will be one's downfall. Roland, talk so that we can understand. No suo no die. 1. Fine. Don't look at me like that. I'll be more direct. It means that you won't die if you don't deserve to die. If you deserve to die, then you'll die. The scene before us caused countless exclamations, as the undying immortal Lorcan met his scariest opponent ever. When the Brothers of the Gourd, system, are you sure that you're going to call them by this name? Fine. When the unnamed divine sins locked onto their father, the destined battle began explosively. Or should I say that it was a suppression rather than a battle? If immortal Lorcan had been in his top, uninjured condition, perhaps this battle would have been more equally matched. However, he had been heavily injured in the mortal plane, and he had just gone through the baptism of ice and fire. The destruction of his clone children had also given him quite a bit of damage. Just maintaining his physical body and preventing it from collapse was already getting difficult for him, not to mention he had to deal with the incredibly dangerous divine sins. On the other side, the 7 rebellious children had just been revived, and their powerful hatred gave them limitless motivation. Their natural talent to absorb the earth element was the natural counter to all earth elemental creatures, and since they were immortal Lorcan's clone children, they also had immortal Lorcan's battle experience and techniques. These souls had been within immortal Lorcan's body just earlier, but they now began fighting with him. This time, even the strong immortal Lorcan had a look of despair flash in his eyes when he discovered that his heavy punch, which could tear even the dimensional fabric, now became his opponent's technique. Ah, if you want my head, you'll have to take it with your lives. Still, immortal Lorcan raised his head and shouted angrily to the skies before exploding with the viciousness of a warrior. But, no matter what he did, it was still meaningless. What happened next showed that this battle had a foregone conclusion from the very start. Or perhaps I should call this a dinner rather than a battle. Immortal Lorcan's attacks had all become ineffective, and any contact caused his body parts to be stolen through earth element absorption. What could he do? With just a single exchange, immortal Lorcan was pressed down onto the ground, which was followed by an early Armageddon, just for him. Ah! The 7 divine sins opened their mouths wide and began chowing down on their father's flesh and bones. They instinctively began completing their incomplete selves, weakening immortal Lorcan by stealing away his earth element. Immortal Lorcan could only pitifully scream as he watched his own demise. After immortal Lorcan devoured more than 30 of his own children, it was time for his children to devour him. Divine sins. Unnamed. The divine sins were created from the earth elemental god immortal Lorcan. Currently undergoing evolution. Already known abilities: earth element absorption, negative divine power. System assessment: if you can't find any method to deal with them, then just run away. This isn't shameful as well. I'm being serious. In the earth elemental plane, most likely not even a true god will be their match. The system's assessment was very appropriate. Even the forbidden spells casting behind me had ended. Kate had preferred to take the elemental backlash and escape with his team. Seeing the earth elemental god receive the punishment he deserved, I hesitated for a moment before coming to a decision. We'll retreat as well. Everyone wait a moment. Just as I made the decision to retreat, Rand suddenly spoke up with an awkward expression on her face. She never expected things to end up like this. I think I can control them. What? What? Everyone's faces were filled with shock. Controlling divine sins? This was unheard of. If divine sins could be controlled so easily, they wouldn't be existences that gave even true gods headaches. The only way to deal with them was to repeatedly seal them. Seeing our expressions of shock, Rand started panicking as well. Everything she did just now was when she was in a daze, and even she was unsure of what it was. When I was making a connection with them earlier, there was a line like Rankin mist, representative of chaos, shall give you all one more chance. Become my slaves for a chance at revenge in the incantation. They answered my summons, so a contract should have been formed. I should be able to control them, I think. Can you control them now? Make them listen to your commands? You're certain? Although there may have been a contract, divine sins were far too dangerous. It was to the extent that even demons wouldn't dare to deal with one, which was unbelievable. Even when I possessed Shadow, it was the same for me. I barely dared to use him. Apart from fearing that the gods would notice and simply kill me with a flick of their fingers, I also feared the possible backlash from him. I've researched divine sins as well before. They're basically impossible to communicate with. Are you certain that they even understand what a contract between master and servant is? When you approach one, just see if they'll treat you as a passing snack. Ren sunk into meditation as she closed her eyes and lowered her head. She was inspecting the contract connections she had with them and was trying to see if she could control them. But she quickly opened her eyes with an expression filled with fear. These creatures have no sense of reason at all. They instinctively hate everything, and they want to tear everything apart. At most, I can control them to have them destroy someone, but I can't control them to not destroy someone. Welp, that was the result, after all. But it was already much better than what I expected. Can you order them to hibernate? Judging from my experience in controlling Shadow, divine sins all acted based on instinct. Commands that were similar to instincts such as eat, sleep, and attack were all commands that they could understand. Let me try. Ren closed her eyes again, and this time she revealed a jubilant expression. Not currently, but it should work once they've eaten their full. Hearing this, everyone finally heaved breaths of relief. For Imrita Lorcan, who was so strong, to turn into food for these divine sins so easily gave us a huge amount of pressure. We're still going to retreat. Hurry up. We can't guarantee that after they're done with the main course they won't treat us as a side dish. Ren, when they're done snacking, immediately order them to sink into eternal hibernation. Camdian, if the hibernation succeeds, immediately notify all the Earth Elemental Lords to not enter this area. It would be best to construct a forbidden zone here so that they can truly sleep for eternity. Hearing this, Ren began to pout. It would seem that she had some objections to my plan. Can we take one to the mortal plane? With how strong each one of them is, it could be a help to us. Don't even think about it. There's only one possible result if we take a divine sin with us to the mortal plane, the true gods descending upon us in a horde, immediately killing the divine sin and swatting you to death like a fly along the way. Even if you manage to hide one successfully, this type of life form, which only knows how to destroy, would cause a catastrophe either sooner or later. Ren instantly went into a depression, with an expression just like a kid who had her candy stolen from her. But just borrowing part of its power is alright. I remember that Karo has spells on partial dimensional summoning, but that will take time to research and learn as well. Right now, let's not waste any more time and retreat immediately. Ren, you first. Ren nodded when I said this and turned around to leave, but everyone else paused in surprise, as they understood what I implied by my words. Roland, you're not intending to retreat with us? Amelia was rather hesitant. I still need to go over to the elemental throne and gather some materials. You know about this already. Let's go together. That's Imrita Lorcan's old nest, after all. Better to be on the safe side. No need. It's just material gathering, such a small matter. You guys should leave first. Your power wavelengths are too obvious, and those 7 brothers of the guard will notice you. Margaret stepped forth and seemed to want to say something when Adam pulled her and stopped her. He walked in front of Amelia and took charge. Alright, we'll leave first. You should finish up on your end as quickly as possible as well. I nodded and stomped as a pitch-black shadow surrounded me, and I transformed into shadows and went ahead at high speed, no longer able to hear the argument behind me. Why did you let him go? It was obvious that he was lying. Roland has the habit of touching his nose whenever he lies, and you know about it as well. With his current power rank, if he meets some tough opponent. Margaret was filled with dissatisfaction as she questioned Adam. Of course I know that he was lying, but he wasn't entirely being dishonest either. It's true that he's going to gather materials, but getting revenge is probably the main topic he has in mind. Revenge against who? Is there some enemy of his at the elemental throne? Of course, Imrita Lorcan. Didn't we come all the way here just for him? Adam's face was filled with astonishment, with an expression like how could Margaret ask such an idiotic question? However, Margaret was currently now glancing at the battlefield close by where Immortal Lorcan had been over half devoured and was deader than dead. You're saying that Immortal Lorcan's not dead yet? Of course not. There's no way that he's so easy to deal with. For such a sly old fox, faking his death couldn't be any more normal. Didn't we meet someone who faked his death that one year, and you were even the one who saw through it? Margaret was instantly rendered speechless. The sly old fox that she uncovered back in the day had been Roland himself. Do you have any proof? My instinct. As for evidence or whatever, you'll have to ask Roland. He's more suitable at being a brainy detective. At hearing this, Margaret's icy expression started defrosting, but she was still filled with dissatisfaction. She had now deduced that these two old friends had played a trick on her again, while Amelia even directly headed towards the Elemental Throne's direction. However, Adam blocked her in a flash. Get out of the way. I'm going to go help him. Don't think that Roland's the type to not mind anything. Actually, he really cares about the people of the mist that had died. Amelia was somewhat confused to hear this, as she didn't think it had anything to do with the current situation. Since the people of the mist suffered such great losses, and Immortal Lorcan is the only remaining perpetrator that's still having such a carefree time outside, how could Roland possibly let this stand? Now, do you understand why he went by himself? Revenge by single combat? That's just too foolish. Adam shrugged rather helplessly. I apologize. Sometimes, men are such foolish creatures. Without being able to personally slay the perpetrator and serve justice for the dead, he probably won't be able to sleep well at night. Amelia reflexively chewed on her fingers and showed her obvious worry, but Margaret suddenly consoled her. Have you ever seen Roland be on the losing end in a battle of wits? He's such a sly one. How could he possibly go to his death so easily? Since this is a battle that Roland's prepared for so long already, you should be worried about his enemy. And, right now, just as Adam surmised, I was heading for the target coordinates that Bai Feng had provided me. My angry shouting reverberated through the underground labyrinth. Coward! I'm by myself, and you still don't dare to show yourself? If you don't come out, I'll attract those divine sins to this location, and watch how you die. It seemed that my threat achieved its purpose, as a familiar voice finally sounded behind me, but it was filled with bone-piercing hatred. Damned Roland! It's all because of you I lost everything. Today, it'll be either your death or mine. Note 1. According to Wikipedia, no Zuo no die, Chinese, or, is a Chinese internet meme. The original wording of the Chinese phrase means one would not be in trouble had one not asked for it. The Zuo here means asking for unnecessary trouble. Chapter 225, Brink. This was a giant's temple. Massive purple gemstone embedded doors towered at the entrance, and were large enough for multiple titans to enter together. The tall ceiling seemed as distant as the clouds, and the interior was wide enough for multiple gigantic dragons to fly around as they pleased. Even the ground was paved with rare and valuable types of jade. The drawings on the walls of the temple were countless fairy tale-like stories, with various epic battlefields, including enemies that were incredibly strong. There were true gods from the ancient past, legend-ranked demons, and countless extinct creatures that were unidentifiable. The giant in the drawings, who stepped on dragons and slew gods as the main character, was the master of this temple, the Earth Elemental God Immortal Lorcan. In the past, the Earth Elemental God had been the most ancient god at the very top. For all the undying, this legendary title represented countless years of history and epics and legends. Generations of true gods had perished and risen up, while Immortal Lorcan had existed throughout all these years. He had left his own mark upon history, which was plenty of proof for his strength. The countless ages had allowed Immortal Lorcan to arrange his old nest into a glorious divine temple just for himself. In the past, this place had been filled with his loyal servants and worshippers that would come from thousands of kilometers away just to see him. Immortal Lorcan would sit high on his throne and observe the teeming life forms below. However, right now, this place was entirely empty. The only guest standing in the plaza seemed like an ant compared to the temple's size. But, he was an unmistakable uninvited guest, as well as the most dangerous challenger. Immortal Lorcan, come out here. I know that you're hiding in here. If you don't come out, I'm going to smash the elemental throne to pieces. How did you know that I wasn't dead? Imrita Lorcan's familiar voice echoed throughout the temple, and I could hear the suppressed rage contained within his words. For him to have been forced down from his glorious throne all the way to hiding in a corner was completely the fault of this ant before him. Of course he would hate me. His angry question was as loud as a thunderclap, but I ignored him. I had no intention of giving a long speech, which would give my enemy enough time to prepare and overturn the situation. Actually, I knew from the very start that he couldn't possibly have been defeated just like that. The title of the oldest and strongest elemental god couldn't have possibly been for show. I had guessed, from the very start, what Imrita Lorcan would do when our forces gained an overwhelming advantage early in the battle, and he had refused to show himself no matter what. Imrita Lorcan's pretending not to notice me while secretly making his own preparations? He must be planning on winning without even taking part in battle himself. You want to know how I came to this conclusion? Because if I was in his situation, I would do the same thing. If I was in the situation where my power level was at an all-time low, and I was facing an enemy where I had a less than 20% chance of victory, then I would naturally also want to think of ways to avoid this battle. From his viewpoint, as an elemental god, this place would be my home field. Fleeing without battling was rather impossible to think of. Even if I ran away, my enemy would surely chase me wherever I fled, and I might very well be discovered by my enemies while in my seriously injured state. And if I was to fight a battle where I was certain to lose, that would be even more foolish. Using oneself as the standard to measure the enemy was an iron maxim that guided countless undying individuals past numerous calamities. In a way, Imrita Lorcan was no honest and direct good person, so his choices were incredibly similar to what I would have chosen. Is he going to fake his death or escape? He's the Earth Elemental God, after all, and he'll be greatly weakened if he leaves this plane. In that case, that only leaves faking his death, tossing out some bait and having the bait die off in his own place so that all his enemies believed he was dead was one of the most common and effective tactics that old sly foxes like him preferred to use in order to continue surviving. In order to make things realistic enough to where all the elemental lords believed that he was dead, Imrita Lorcan would have to pay a heavy price. He was even willing to sacrifice the majority of his power for this, as just surviving was enough for him. As long as he survived, he had the hope of becoming stronger again and regaining everything he had lost. And what absolutely confirmed for me that the Imrita Lorcan up above had only been yet another clone of his which contained the majority of his true power was the scene where he was devoured. As the Earth Elemental God, even if some of his Earth Element power was absorbed by the Divine Sense, he could have just replenished his power again using the Elemental Throne. However, I didn't see any signs of him gathering the Earth Element again to reform himself. He died too quickly. It was almost as if he was trying to die as fast as he could. And since he already made such a large sacrifice, I suppose that even having the Elemental Throne be destroyed, which would cause him to lose his identity as the Earth Elemental God, was within his limits. He would definitely hide in silence until the very end unless I managed to threaten his life like with the Divine Sense. Even if I lose everything, it's fine as long as I'm still alive. I shall pay back my losses today tenfold tomorrow. I could even imagine the way he looked, grinding his teeth in the shadows. After all, I did the same thing in the past, but I definitely didn't want his idea of surviving and taking revenge in the future to come to fruition. The stubbornness of the Undying helped him to decide, from the very beginning, to sacrifice almost everything in order to live. If it was someone else, perhaps I would even praise him a little, but since this was that bastard Imrita Lorcan, I only had one comment. You want to live? Dream on. Why didn't you ask those who you killed, all those innocents that died because of war, whether they wanted to live or not? I have many personality defects. Probably the ones at the forefront are stinginess and always bearing a grudge. I probably wasn't going to be able to change them ever in my lifetime, nor did I intend to change them. For the true secret perpetrators that destroyed the Mist Kingdom back in the day, I spent hundreds of years to find them all and kill them. In this battle, all the Beastmen tribe leaders had died off, and we were still finishing up the post-combat dealings with them. But if the only escapee, Imrita Lorcan, didn't die, I wouldn't be able to sleep well at night. The Earth Elemental God? Hey, No wonder you have the nickname of a cowardly turtle. You don't even dare to come out when I'm by myself. Are you that afraid of me? For an elemental god to actually fear a newbie who just entered the gold rank, if everybody knew about this, your reputation would be ruined. Oh, my apologies, I forgot that you didn't have much of a reputation to begin with. Roland, you're courting death. Immortal Lorcan's angry roars kept echoing within the empty temple, but I still had no way of knowing just where he was hiding. None my detection magic worked in finding him, so it seemed that he was hidden quite well. After paying such a price, it was almost impossible for Immortal Lorcan to be willing to show himself. He would almost certainly hide like a cowardly turtle till the end. When an existence like Immortal Lorcan abandoned everything and focused only on hiding his presence, it would be exceedingly difficult to find him. So, that was why I kept taunting him to try and get him to come out. I needed to make him think that he could take me on 100%, as well as inflame the deep grudge he had for me, so that he could no longer calmly tolerate his most hated enemy parading about in front of him. With all the above factors completed, I would also give Immortal Lorcan hope that he could protect the elemental throne and his godhood status, as I personally went about destroying the elemental throne, which only his interference would be able to stop me from doing. With all these factors added up, I felt that he would never be able to resist coming out. Come, as long as you kill me, you can have your revenge, as well as keep your divinity. Yep, I was using myself as the bait to reel in a big fish. Although I might be reeling a whale, only by showing him that I had truly come by myself and making him think like he could win would Immortal Lorcan be willing to appear. This would be my only chance at personally taking revenge. And the moment he appeared, it would definitely be a battle to the death. The fact that he still hadn't appeared using his true body meant that he was still testing to see if I had some type of ambush waiting for him. Alright then, if you won't come out, I'll just destroy this elemental throne, and you can sleep for eternity. I walked forward casually like I was taking a leisurely walk, but the air within the temple suddenly changed pressure to the point that it was slightly suffocating. This caused me to smile. An ambush? He's finally fallen for the bait. I suddenly stabbed my pale white sacred sword of justice into the ground. Ice instantly covered this area, and the sound of pain that came from underground was incredibly pleasing to my ears. That bastard had finally taken the bait. Roland, we found him. Not only is he underground, he's all over. In a way, we're inside his stomach. Harloy's notification astonished me. Whatever was beneath me still wasn't his true body. But soon, I received a more detailed explanation. He probably separated the concept of his very existence and placed them within the different drawings on the wall. Only by putting them all together will it become a complete elemental god. This basically means that he forcefully separated his power and soul. Not only will this greatly weaken his power, it's more painful than you can imagine. It's far worse than dying over and over again. So this guy definitely quite vicious even to himself. Only by treating oneself viciously will one be able to treat others even more viciously. Be careful. This time, you've hooked a brutal, man-eating shark. At this moment, all those truly realistic seeming drawings flashed through my mind. Now I understood how he had hidden himself so well. After I blocked his underground ambush and glanced over at the drawings on the walls, Immortal Lorcan knew that he had been exposed. The next second, all those drawings came to life, as all the Immortal Lorcans depicted within them started materializing into ethereal flashing figures. The next moment, the figures combined together and a familiar figure was once again in front of me. Immortal Lorcan. Just like that day, when I had met him in the underground labyrinth at Tanchuan, a pitch-black stone giant was viciously glaring at me with hatred in his eyes. Meanwhile, I started laughing out loudly. I can finally have my revenge. Beifing. Now. After I shouted out in anger, the entire earth started trembling. Behind us, the giant sandworms now under the command of the Jerkin Hunter were beginning to enjoy the finest meal they had ever tasted, the symbol of authority that countless high-level earth elemental creatures dreamed about. The Earth Elemental Throne. The pitch-black giant looked at me in astonishment. He probably never imagined that his well-defended treasure trove had been dug through to by an underground tunnel. Why are you looking at me like that? Did you really think that I would leave the Elemental Throne alone for you? The Elemental Throne was my main target from the very start. Yep, coming here to the Earth Elemental Throne and finding Immortal Lorcan was for my personal grudge, but destroying the Elemental Throne was my main strategic objective here. As long as I achieve this goal, I would definitely have profited by coming here. The revival of the elemental gods caused an increase in the elemental tide. This would then lead to a closer connection between all the planes with the mortal plane. Soon, a new battle and unwelcome invaders would be appearing. And unlike history, the elemental gods were being far more active than usual, and the speed of increase for the elemental tide had far surpassed history. Unless I took action, there would probably be very little time to prepare for the major upcoming battles in the mortal plane. The premature arrival of the undead calamity would be the most obvious example. The elemental throne creates elemental gods. If any of the elemental planes have their elemental throne destroyed, that means that no new elemental god will be able to be born. The elemental tide will flow back just like how water always flows to lower places, as the elemental plane will absorb additional amounts of its own element to create a new elemental throne. In that case, the increase in the elemental tide for the mortal plane should stop for the time being. From a certain standpoint, every active elemental god in the mortal plane was my enemy. That was why I made Camdion take the blame for me on a certain matter. I definitely didn't promise a single thing to any Earth Elemental Lord. I only hinted to Camdion that only by eliminating Immortal Lorcan can a new Earth Elemental God be born, and this is how we can lure the Earth Elemental Lords into fighting for our cause. I didn't say a single lie. I simply didn't mention the time it would take for the next Earth Elemental God to be born. Anything extra was imagined solely by Camdion himself, and I didn't even show my face around, so the Earth Elemental Lords would only be able to blame Camdion for not being able to become the Earth Elemental God. Yep, I had dug a trap that he had kindly fallen into for me. The best result would be that the Earth Elemental Lords were so furious that they ganged up against Camdion and managed to kill him for me, which would definitely save me a lot of trouble. At this time, all the seeds I had planted were finally sprouting, and it was time for me to claim my rewards from my traps. The Elemental Throne was currently being devoured by the giant sandworms that lacked intelligence, and every bite fell to Immortal Lorcan as if they were biting into his heart. His diminishing divine power had been gathered by him over the countless years, and he was weakening with every moment. This scene was basically a reenactment of what happened at Anchuan. Only this time, I didn't leave even a single chance for him to break past any obstacle, setting traps for him every step of the way. If he had stayed within the walls of his temple, even if he lost his elemental throne, nobody would have been able to find him. But now, he had come out already, and the elemental throne was destroyed. It would be nearly impossible for him to escape now. There's only battling to the death. At this very moment, a sliver of fear shot through Immortal Lorcan's eyes. He truly felt that his life was now being threatened, but at the very next moment, his fear transformed into viciousness. Some people would become cowardly when it came to a junction of life or death, while some people would explosively erupt and go all out against their enemy, at the very least trying to take their enemy with them in death. It was obvious that Immortal Lorcan, who had reigned for over tens of thousands of years, was of the second type. Together with his angry roaring was the collapse of his glorious temple. Immortal Lorcan had now taken back all of his power as he strengthened his body while the earth shook around us. His pitch-black stone armor was growing spikes, and his eyes under that armor were filled with maniacal, bone-piercing hatred. Roland, he's coming. You've forced this vicious wolf to the brink. This will be the final, most furious attack of all. You can't be too cautious. Before Harloy's reminder even faded from my ears, I already started laughing out loudly. Isn't this exactly what I wanted? Come, Immortal Lorcan. Don't you hate me, and want to tear me to pieces? It's the exact same for me. I've long since wanted to slice and dice you into little pieces. In that case, let us have an all-out battle to the death, right here, you and me. Let us battle until one of us is deader than dead. Only the side with the deeper hatred that wants to kill the other more will be able to survive. My injured vicious opponent used his angry roaring and rushing over to me in lieu of his answer. As for me, I tossed away the pale white sacred sword in my hands. The upcoming battle wasn't one that an epic level weapon like it would be able to participate in. Once Harloy's returned to me, I would have an even better sword, a magical sword that would be able to destroy anything. Awaken, Yin's Extreme, Ice Calamity. Chapter 226, icy flames. The entire temple was collapsing. Due to its height, the broken stones that fell from the ceiling hit with the force of meteors, smashing large holes into the ground. However, the two that were facing off against each other ignored this nearby threat. With a flash, the gigantic black stone giant vanished completely. In the very next instant, I swung my sword. Clang! In the midst of falling stones, the sword slice met Immortal Lorcan's heavy fist, sending sparks flying everywhere. The impact forced me into the ground, and my right arm, which held my sword, ached with pain. My Perliku, one also started bleeding. However, I revealed a delighted expression. I'm able to block his attack. Yep, facing off against Immortal Lorcan and being able to block his heavy fist was already beyond my expectations. You really think you can win just by being able to block me? A thunderous roar echoed throughout the temple as the raging earth elemental god vented his anger and laughed tauntingly at my delight. Then let me inform you that punch just now was only 1% of my strength. Doesn't that make you despair? Hearing this, I laughed out even louder than he did. Was he just testing the waters? It was the same for both of us. My sword slice just now hadn't used any of my trump cards. Even though I was actually somewhat disappointed inside, I definitely wouldn't let it show or lose in a war of words. I know how to talk a good fight, too. My attack just now was also only 1% of my strength. Were you trying to give me a massage? The power of frigid ice was gradually spreading down my sword, and everything was within my expectations. Before I could even stand back up, Immortal Lorcan's furious barrage of attacks arrived again. Whoosh! Immortal Lorcan didn't respond to me this time as he took a deep breath, shook his body, stomped, and instantly vanished again. His gigantic body had inconceivable agility. The afterimages he left behind were actually beyond the ability of my eyes to perceive. I only saw a blur before the giant arrived before me. The only thing I could do was follow my combat instincts and wield my silver longsword in defense. A force that was too strong to resist against was transmitted to me through my sword. The scenery around me changed at a rapid pace. With just a single blow, I was sent crashing into the incredibly high ceiling. Cough. The impact from my back hitting the ceiling caused me to cough out a large amount of blood. This blow heavily injured my internal organs. It would seem that there was still a large difference between our strengths. My physical body's strength was akin to a titan's but was nothing before him at all. No wonder all those tower giants were also destroyed by Immortal Lorcan in a single blow. My right arm was beginning to ice over, and my ice crystal sword was frozen to my hand, which was the only reason I hadn't dropped it. With this exchange of blows, I had lost again, but I still laughed. The force of gravity caused me to fall from the ceiling, but a pair of crystal ice wings suddenly opened up behind my back. The preparations are complete, and he shouldn't be as on guard anymore. In that case, you should allow him to have a taste of your world. The female lolly's voice that sounded in my ears seemed to remind me that I wasn't alone in facing off against my mortal enemy. Meanwhile, Immortal Lorcan was tossing rocks at me from below. They flew at me with the force of a meteor shower. Boom! 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 Colossal holes were created in the ceiling from the force of Immortal Lorcan's thrown rocks. However, I was gliding through this meteor shower. With darting, rolling, and gliding movements, Immortal Lorcan's rocks had 0% chance of hitting me thanks to Harlois, who was controlling my flight. With her assistance, I was able to concentrate on my next attack. Immortal Lorcan. Together with my angry roar was the icy sword energy coming from a furious attack. It was the most direct type of challenge invitation possible. When Immortal Lorcan saw that I was actually gliding right toward him with an obvious intention to clash with him head on, he remained unafraid. For someone like him who specialized in melee battles, there was no way that he would be afraid of such an ambush. However, some type of national instinct seemed to remind him of something. He had an ominous premonition, so he imperceptibly focused on the sword that I was holding, the preternaturally beautiful sword of ice. My sword was far longer than most, at nearly 1.6 meters. Its entire body was made of ice crystals, and there was a pair of goddesses embracing on the hilt of my sword. The blade was actually two ice blades that twisted around each other. The sword was as transparent as glass and seemed to be sparkling like the stars. It was obviously an exquisite sword that seemed like a work of art, but Imrudil Lorcan instinctively felt afraid as he looked at the sword. Fear was an emotion that he was supposed to have abandoned long ago. Right after, he stomped and took a deep breath, causing that inexplicable sense of fear to disappear. A magic sword that can affect emotions? So what? This unusual elemental god, who had even managed to become a master monk, was able to ignore all negative emotions due to the countless battles he had been through. They had tempered his heart and soul. In combat, he was always able to fight at 100%. What he perceived to be a mere magic sword able to influence emotions was nothing more than scrap metal to him. This time, he didn't intend to dodge. Imrudil Lorcan was intending to teach me just what true strength was. As I descended using my wings of ice, Imrudil Lorcan suddenly jumped up into the air and my icy sword once again clashed against his heavy fist. We both fought using our basic instincts. There was no difference from last time. I was thrown upwards again, and the ceiling was so hard that I wanted to cry. But, as I wiped away the blood I coughed up with my sleeve, I started smiling in delight as I looked at my opponent. Imrudil Lorcan was uninjured, but there was now something blue flashing on his right arm. Suddenly, that speck of blue started expanding. The black stone giant glanced at it and saw the spreading ice, so he gritted his teeth and sliced down on his right arm with his left arm. Snap! Imrudil Lorcan's entire right arm and right elbow were cut off, and it transformed into a block of ice which shattered on the ground. Nothing happened at all besides that. Imrudil Lorcan didn't care about something like losing an arm. This had become a common thing for him way long ago when he was dealing with powerful enemies, and all he had to do was gather the earth element and create a new arm. It didn't hurt one bit. It was just that being tricked like this made him quite angry, which was why he glared at me. Fool, all you know is how to play useless tricks. Before he even finished speaking, his angry glare changed into shock and disbelief. What have you done? Why can't I regrow my limb? Why? Impossible. What did I do? I didn't do anything. It's just that this ice sword of mine isn't so easy to deal with. This is my strongest sword of all. What was strength, and did this world have the so-called strongest power rank of all? For every living being who sought to become stronger, they would all wonder about this. And based on their different understandings of the concept of strength, they would walk different paths. On the path to becoming stronger, the natural course of evolution and the cultivation that powerful individuals undertook were actually the same things. Some would believe that a solid defense was the best, so either they would put on heavy armor or maybe grow a solid outer shell. Some would believe that high speed to the point where others couldn't see them clearly was the strongest. Perhaps they would become an agile assassin or even grow wings and speedy legs. True top-level existences were impossible to copy. They had their own personal understandings about strength. Imrudil Lorcan was incredibly strong. He abandoned the fancy-seeming elemental magic and wholeheartedly threw himself into controlling the power of physical might. His elemental composition was the most practical muscular structure of all, which further increased his physical power that was already at the top of the world. Then, he even learned the weakling mortal's fighting techniques and used the most practical of his talents to evolve his physical combat ability to the utmost. To be honest, the moment I saw Imrudil Lorcan rip through dimensional fabric with just pure physical power earlier, I knew that there wouldn't be a single person alive who could confidently say that he or she could defeat Imrudil Lorcan solely in physical combat. This was already taking into consideration that the current Imrudil Lorcan was injured all over and that his power wasn't even 1/10 of his maximum power level at his strongest. Sword Saints? Imrudil Lorcan's fighting experience and techniques were far above the level of the so-called human Sword Saints. His over 10,000 years of fighting experience helped him to understand countless schools of martial arts techniques. Perhaps he lacked humans' creativity and innovation and was unable to come up with his own school of martial arts, and perhaps he might have lost in martial arts techniques to some genius in the past. But when you add on the fact that Imrudil Lorcan possessed a physical body of unmatched might, he remained unbeatable in physical combat. However, no matter how strong Imrudil Lorcan was, it was all meaningless to me. I wasn't being arrogant. It was due to our different interpretations of what strength was. So-called strength is undoubtedly an unblockable sword, attack power that can't be defended against, an impenetrable shield, a solid defense that can block all attacks, and an abnormal attacking method that's difficult to dodge. A surprise attack method that's too hard to conceive of and be on guard against. Perhaps this was due to my way of thinking as a transmigrator. My understanding of strength was completely different from the mainstream understanding of strength in this world, which was why I never hesitated to use small tricks or underhanded techniques. As long as they could be of use to me, I would attempt to learn anything and everything, and make it my own strategy. If Imrudil Lorcan was the representative of the specialist school of thought, where he continued to improve upon his greatest strength, then my path could perhaps be described as the generalist school of thought. Perhaps I'm not my opponent's match in certain areas, but I can find a method to counter my opponent's strengths. I'll always use my strengths to attack my opponent's weaknesses. Imrudil Lorcan's very strong? Indeed, but his attacking method is obviously too simplistic. All I need is a shield that can counter him and seal off his advantage, as well as a sword that can slice through his rock-solid defense, and that'll be enough. I don't need to be better than him in his strongest area. I simply need to win. So-called strength is the power to defeat your enemy, that's all. And right now, I just happen to possess a magic sword in my hands that was easily able to slice through Imrudil Lorcan's defenses. Ice Calamity. This was an incredibly dangerous magic sword, dangerous to the point that I didn't even dare to use it in the mortal plane. The reason? Just like those 7 brothers of the gourd, its power came from Shadow, an incredibly dangerous divine sin. I had no intentions of having fun by being ganged up upon by all the true gods. When Shadow combined with Harl Ois, I was finally able to control his powers, which were a double-edged sword. His cold flames of despair finally became my power. Come, Imrudil Lorcan. When temperatures reach absolute zero, what will happen? My ice crystal sword emitted blinding silver flashes, and the arcs of my sword swings sent blue flames into the air. This was no combination magic of any sort, it was the pure gathering of coldness. It was ice magic with the power of a divine sin, which even the gods would fear. Things always develop in the opposite direction when they become extreme. When coldness reached an extreme point, the extreme cold air actually gathered into the shape of flames. Just looking at the slowly burning flames of ice made Imrudil Lorcan feel suffocated, as if those icy flames were spreading on his arm and death was waiting for him right behind his back. If he hadn't been willing to slice off his right arm earlier, he was well aware that perhaps he would be entirely frozen solid right now. This was a divine sin's curse against the world and Shadow's natural talent ability. It was to make everything reach the absolute limit of low temperature, absolute zero. At this abnormally low temperature, physical matter wouldn't be in liquid, solid, or gas state anymore. Instead, they would become superatoms, the most basic state of all. These atoms would stop moving, stop acting, freeze over, and merely exist. At absolute zero, any power would vanish, and any consciousness would enter hibernation. They could only exist, as if time itself had been frozen. It was only natural that Imrudil Lorcan's arm was unable to be regrown. The concept of his arm still existed, but it was simply frozen solid. Just like how humans were unable to grow 3 arms, as long as he didn't destroy the concept of his arm that I had frozen, he would never be able to regrow it. This was a type of toxic poison, a poison of the world that could freeze everything, a time poison that could freeze even the most basic fundamental natural laws of space and time. This was also why I feared Shadow so much. If he had ever spat a mouthful of icy flames at me, it probably wouldn't be any different from me sleeping all the way until the end of the world. There was nothing in this world that could possibly be immune to these icy flames. The only reason I was able to use them was that I possessed an even stronger shield, strong enough to block this poison of the world. Since these icy flames were able to even freeze time itself, then how could this world possibly possess something that could defend against it? Indeed, while this world may not possess anything, that wasn't true of my new world view. This really is the coldest ice. My hands are already numb to the point that I can't feel them anymore. Yikes, yikes. Even though I was obviously in the scorching hot earth elemental plane, I kept saying how cold it was as if it were the middle of winter. My arms were currently covered with the coldest ice that came from my new world. Although I called it the coldest, it didn't actually have much of a difference from the ice in this world. However, when I gave it the concept of coldest ice in the world, then even the divine sin's icy flames were no longer able to make this coldest ice's temperature go any lower, which was how I was able to protect myself. Of course, I couldn't do anything about the fact that I would have frostbite afterwards. This was a special right of the creator of a new world, and also the impenetrable armor that I prepared for myself. What? You're saying that I used the wrong word? I should be using the word indestructible rather than impenetrable. Hey, you'll soon find out why I use the word impenetrable. As I forcefully stuck my calamity-bringing ice crystal sword into the ground, the familiar frigid earth of my world appeared around us. Immortal Lorcan, welcome to my world, frigid winter earth. You dare to challenge the divine authority of the Creator? You're insane. His angry questioning suddenly stopped. The frigid ice covered me and transformed into a heavy armor of frozen ice, while that dangerous two-handed longsword suddenly started burning with blue flames and transformed me into a person on fire. This is a nightmarish opponent. He actually dares to wear such a thing? Using the power of a divine sin and challenging the divine authority of the Creator Reich herself. You're a heretic far crazier than I am. You're challenging all the true gods. You're challenging the very basic order and natural law of the world. Immortal Lorcan's evaluation of his enemy Roland kept continuously increasing, but upon seeing this sight, he knew that he had still underestimated me. I was completely illogical to him. After the first time, Immortal Lorcan had already lost the confidence to defeat me. For a mortal that seemed so insignificant to him, I actually became a threatening opponent, and now that he had witnessed me challenging the Creator herself, he probably felt that I had gone completely insane. For the first time, Immortal Lorcan was seeing himself meet his own end, as well as regretting, for the first time, that he had gained such a dangerous mortal enemy, all for the sake of some mortal beastman. How could I possibly let the signs of fear and regret in his eyes slip past me? I laughed in satisfaction. Frigid, frozen ice now covered this entire area. Since the long preparation time required for it had already completed, my wintry world had now descended upon this place, and I had instantly pulled Immortal Lorcan into this frozen plain as well. This time, there would be no escaping for him. Ding, ding, ding. Clear sounds resounded and the countless amount of frozen ice crystallized into numerous huge ice swords. This icy plains had now transformed into a corridor of innumerable swords. After that, when I stuck my ice calamity sword into the mountain, those fatal blue flames appeared on every single ice sword's blade. I randomly picked up an ice sword. The flames upon it were burning vigorously, just like torches, and caused me to smile in satisfaction. This time, it was my turn to be rushing Immortal Lorcan head on. Immortal Lorcan, there are no more chances for you to repent. Now then, let us begin our second round in our duel to the death. I said before that it's time to settle everything between us. You're a god that's high up above. Taste the revenge of a mortal that you view as nothing more than an ant. Note: 1. The space between one's forefinger and thumb. Chapter 227. Decision. The frozen earth replaced the collapsing temple. As an enemy of this world, my world, Immortal Lorcan was currently being attacked by the entire world. Ice pillars would suddenly appear out of the ground, and blizzards would descend upon him without any warning. Even the rocks he accidentally kicked away would come back and land on his head. This entire world viewed him as an enemy and was acting upon it. This wasn't even something intentional. It was simply because, as the creator of this world, I viewed him as an enemy. This world was getting its own rage upon him as well. Although nothing it did was life-threatening for Immortal Lorcan, being in this world, where even the very environment was literally hostile to him, was inhibiting. He would have to worry about tripping every time he took a step. My world wasn't complete yet, and the only elements I could control within it were the ice and snow. Perhaps these attacks were unable to even damage Immortal Lorcan, who was in a class of his own, but the enmity and attacks from my world were sufficient to at least distract his attention. Damn it! If you aren't a coward, then come out of your turtle shell. The angry Immortal Lorcan, who was so famous for having 9 penetrable defenses, never imagined that he would one day have to taunt someone else for taking advantage of a high defense. Yet, sometimes, fate was just that ironic. Now, it was time for Immortal Lorcan, who possessed one of the strongest defenses of all time, to be helpless about his enemy's defense. The ice armor that seemed so fragile was covered with that fatal blue flame, which was obviously untouchable. No matter how strong his fists were, Immortal Lorcan didn't even know how to go about attacking me. HMPH. If you're not a coward, then come hit me. I even began to taunt him. Only now did he begin regretting the fact that he hadn't worked harder at mastering high-level earth elemental magic. In this abnormal world, he was unable to gather any earth element at all for strong attack spells. Even though he wanted to dig up some earth to toss at me like projectile weapons, he discovered that the ground was nothing but ice, and when he forcefully dug some up, it would strangely instantly melt into water. Immortal Lorcan was having a difficult time in this world filled with enmity against him. He had to be careful about every little step, as he could trip over at any instant. The sudden sinking and shaking of the ground was also a bother that kept distracting him. In this world, I suddenly revealed a strange transformation with angel wings and demon feet and scales. This transformation combined the traits of creatures from both order and chaos and was abnormal enough, but my combat strength also multiplied by several folds. The ice and snow in my hands transformed into stakes of ice, and with just the wave of my hands, the hundreds of ice stakes shot out at Immortal Lorcan in artillery fashion. This entire world of ice and snow became an icy cannon formation under my control. However, in Immortal Lorcan's eyes, the most dangerous thing of all was still the blinding icy flames that shone with a demonic blue. Just touching it even a little would require him to dig off another piece of flesh. Meanwhile, I unhesitatingly tossed the random ice sword I had, which was covered in icy flames, at him. It was basically an insult to him who was a master monk and an expert in martial arts. As a veteran master monk, knocking away projectiles was the basics of the basics to him. As for Immortal Lorcan, even if there were several hundred top-level elven archers shooting arrows at him simultaneously, he could confidently knock away every single arrow effortlessly without having a single one land on him. This weapon throwing, which was obviously from a novice, was something he could dodge even with his eyes closed. Even if those icy flames are life-threatening, it's fine as long as I don't touch them. The strange part was that the weapon throw, which shouldn't have been a threat at all, suddenly seemed to increase its speed when it approached him. Damn it! What did you do? There was obviously no outside force affecting the weapon throw, but my thrown swords of ice seemed to sometimes appear slow while at other times appear quick. Just as he felt he was able to dodge one, it would suddenly increase its speed and flick him. Without even waiting for the ice flames to spread, the furious Immortal Lorcan would tear off another piece of his flesh and continued to roar angrily at me. But, my only response was to throw even more ice swords, enveloped in icy flames, at him. In Immortal Lorcan's eyes, those swords increased their speeds by several times again. Those increases in speed caused him to lose the confidence to knock the swords away, so he attempted to dodge with a leap. Unfortunately for him, those swords still managed to make contact with him. An error in judgment? Every possible increase in speed will always have some type of indication, and I can't make such an error in judgment. In that case, it isn't that the projectiles that became faster, I'm the one who became slower. Just what did you do? The angrily roaring Immortal Lorcan actually seemed rather hilarious to me at the moment. By the time his angry shouts reached my ears, it sounded like I'm the one who became slower. Just what did you do? It wasn't only his voice, his movements were also like what you would see in an old movie shown by an almost broken down projector. They were sometimes quick and sometimes slow, always jerky. At this time, he was already poisoned quite deeply, as part of his very concept and existence had been zeroed. Absolute zero. From a certain standpoint, this was a concept that was only in my original world. At this temperature, even the atoms that made up matter would stop their movements, and every form of energy or power would be zeroed, which was why it was called absolute zero. But in this world, the basic particles of matter weren't atoms, protons, electrons, and so on, but rather elemental particles. As for that so-called minus 273 degrees Celsius, which was supposed to be absolute zero, it wasn't a difficult task for any high-level ice mage, and there were even some creatures that lived just fine in environments of under minus 500 degrees Celsius. But divine sins were simply abnormal. This power wasn't merely creating a low temperature, it had the ability to zero the basic elemental particles of an individual's body and reach the theoretical state that shouldn't have been possible, the state where everything would stop. In this world of Ichor there wasn't even a concept of absolute zero. This type of power should never have been born in the first place. Frigid nightmares live symbiotically with their host souls, so did he obtain this concept from me? Every divine sin could be considered an error of the world. If any such errors spread out and caused chain reactions, they would likely cause the entire system of the world to die and collapse. This was why divine sins were viewed as the greatest enemy and threat of the gods. Obviously, directly using these icy flames in the mortal plane was nothing more than suicidal, as it would attract the attention of the true gods. Yet I found another method to use this type of power. Less, even less, so little that it's undetectable, and envelop it in normal ice to dilute it. Afterwards, slowly have it pour out, just like milk that's been added to coffee. After my ability evolved into Death Chill, with this additional modification, it further evolved into its apex. Hibernation Chill. This effect is added to all of your ice attribute attacks and spells. Every single attack or spell will decrease your opponent's speed by 1%. This effect is stackable, and can't be resisted. This effect will automatically disappear if not stacked for 10 minutes. It seemed like a useless ability that was at the bottom of the barrel, but only by actually trying it out did I discover its true fearsomeness. This slowing effect was actually the method for leading my enemy to the state of absolute zero. My enemy wouldn't notice this effect one bit, but it would already take place and begin to slow my opponent. It would decrease their speed more and more imperceptibly, thrusting them outside the axis of time. Senses and reactions will all be slowed. For a warrior, a slowed reaction of 0.1 seconds is already fatal. Misjudging a blade by 0.1 seconds is plenty for death. Not to mention that stacking it as much as you have already, you've probably lost over 50% of your speed. Right now, you're probably feeling like time is passing by in alternating bursts of quickness and slowness, which means that your body's sensory mechanisms for time have all been completely messed up. No, I should say that you're now living in your own time. Although I said this out loud, Immortal Lorcan still had a confused look. This final test of mine confirmed that he was poisoned quite deeply. Perhaps my words sounded like only a rapid-fire incomprehensible chatter to him now. What did you do? What are you saying? I laughed at this. If it could be said that the explosive power of Ice Calamity was a vicious poison that would instantly kill someone, then this Hibernation Chill was a slow, toxic poison that would make people imperceptibly fall into a hibernation state and was usable in the mortal plane. As long as my enemy was hit even one time by any of my ice attacks, his senses would be affected. For a master monk like Immortal Lorcan, who definitely had a strong sense of the flow of battle, 1 second slower or quicker was definitely fatal. He was even foolish enough to try to knock away my projectiles with his empty hands, which was a type of action where even a single misstep wasn't allowed. 1 attempt, 2 attempts, several dozen attempts later, and Immortal Lorcan was now a pincushion. It was somewhat impressive how vicious he was even towards himself, as he dug out every afflicted piece of flesh. He no longer had a single even patch on him all over. However, although he protected himself this way against the Ice Calamity's instant death effect, the Hibernation Chill effect had stacked even more upon him. By now, his time perception was probably slower than a normal person's by at least 3 times or more. Basically, 3 seconds for me was 1 second for him. This was already thanks to his astonishingly high magic resistance. However, since he had already reached this state, the rest would be simple. I spread my wings. I had prepared this transformation for so long, it gave me the power to face him. Now that the vicious tiger had entered the cage, what remained was to execute him. Snap! With a snap of my fingers, the icy flames on my ice armor disappeared, gathering instead on my magic Ice Calamity sword. While this ice armor made Immortal Lorcan utterly unable to attack me, it also gave me an enormous amount of pressure. With the coldest ice covering my body, I had lost a lot of blood, plus I had a weakened body from my injuries while fighting him. My body temperature was dropping precipitously, and I could no longer feel any of my limbs. The loss of temperature and energy caused me to be dizzy and have a major headache, and perhaps having frostbite all over would be the best possible result if I cancelled the ice armor right now. What gave me the biggest pressure wasn't even that, it was the icy flames on my ice armor. After all, it was only the coldest ice, Not the hardest ice, as I was unable to create such a hard ice. If Imrudalorkin had been willing to sacrifice everything and risk his own life to take me down with him, the ice would have definitely shattered with a single blow. It still would have been fine if it just shattered, but if some of the icy flames touched my body after my ice armor shattered, probably nothing in the world could have cured me. This seeming total suppression was actually nothing more than a gamble. I gambled that Imrudalorkin's mastery of elemental magic wasn't high enough to forcefully control the earth element in my world that lacked elemental power. I gambled that Imrudalorkin's personality was cautious to the point that he would never risk his very life unless he was forced to the utter brink. And I gambled that the power I displayed to him scared him to the point that he no longer had the confidence to be able to kill me in a single blow. I couldn't help but gamble. The difference in our powers was just too massive. Even if I used every single plot I could think of, with such a large difference in power, I still had to gamble to fill in the last piece of the puzzle. It seems that I won my gamble. Imrudalorkin hesitated, attempted to dodge and find some way to strike back. But that was what I hoped for. In order for the hibernation chill to stack up, I needed time. It was just like how fires were obviously dangerous but rarely killed people, while water, which seemed so gentle, contained the countless bones of people who knew how to swim. The moment he decided against risking his own life to kill me at all costs, he had already lost his only chance at winning. Now that it had arrived at this, I wouldn't possibly give him any chance where he could risk his own life to take my own. I took a deep breath and shattered my ice armor into water droplets. It would otherwise interfere with the next stage of the battle I had planned. I spread my wings, approached him, and wielded my sword. There was no clash of sword and fist this time. He was definitely not one who would wait around and let me kill him freely. And his reactions from predicting my movements were actually quicker than my movements by 2 seconds. Yet being too quick had the same result as being too slow. His fists met nothing but air, while my ice calamity longsword viciously sliced into his only remaining left arm, causing the familiar blue color to spread on his arm again. Snap! Despair flashed in Imrudalorkin's eyes. That guy sure was tough and vicious. He actually bit off his own left arm. But now that it had come to this, when I placed my blue sword of ice against his neck, he knew that it was all over for him. And just as I was about to execute him, that brave and fearless Imrudalorkin suddenly spoke up. Don't kill me. The rest has been sped up for convenience. I'm willing to serve you as my master. I can become your most loyal servant. My accumulated wealth can make even the richest human emperor seem like a pauper. I know countless secrets and knowledge about the world. And even the greatest grandmasters of magic don't know as much as I do. And even if I lose my position as the Earth Elemental God, I'm still the strongest Earth Elemental Lord, as my power is definitely significant. As long as you give me time, I can become even stronger. There are no benefits in killing me, while accepting me as your servant can bring you endless wealth. It was quite a test of my patience to finish listening to him beg for his life because of the slow speed of his words. But I finished listening to it all, and even laughed out loud at the end. Conquering an elemental god? That sounded rather majestic. Obtaining an elemental god's endless amounts of treasure hoarded over the years? That sounded like a good deal. Having an elemental god as a personal servant and fighter? That sounded great and beneficial. Killing him was only to vent my grudge, while making him into my slave would give me endless benefits. This seemed like an incredible deal, so it seemed that I, who was well known for calculating benefits, had already made my decision. I laughed, and when he saw that I laughed, he also smiled. No. This caused him to instantly become pale. You want to live? Everybody wants to live, but do you know how many people died because of that one earthquake of yours? Or just how many people died in the end because of the war you started? Imrudalorkin's eyes shows that he was rather confused, as if he didn't understand why I was suddenly bringing up this topic. That earthquake killed 376,452 people, and this war killed well over 2 million, so, I understand that you want to live, but right now I want to ask you a question. Did you ever ask them if they wanted to live or not? How can ants be compared with me? Imrudalorkin still wanted to defend himself, but I had lost my patience. Just cleaning up the rubble left behind from the battle, as well as all the corpses, had taken an entire month. I could still hear all those unearthly wails of the relatives that were left alive as if it was yesterday, and right now, The main perpetrator was right at the mercy of my sword and still dared to view my people of the mist as ants. How could I possibly control my emotions? Ants? Ha! Indeed, we may not be as strong as you gods. You are strong because you are undying, while we are weak due to our short lives. Why is it that you damned bastards can't just let us be in peace? Why is it that even though you're all so strong, your battles among gods always have to drag us mortals into your affairs as the cannon fodder? We people of the mist only want to live in peace, so why do you gods always have to repeatedly destroy our homes? 300 years ago, 200 years ago, and this year as well, forcing our country to the brink and disrupting our citizens' lives. Did we people of the mist offend you gods in any way? You so-called venerated existences, why not just do some good deeds and go fight your own wars if you want to fight? Can't you stop dragging us into things and bringing catastrophes upon us? Why can't you just give us a break? Why don't you gods go fight that damned holy war by yourselves? Why do you foolish existences even have the right to be called gods? Why is it that even now, you don't have a speck of regret? Are mortals truly just a bunch of ants that you can step on as you please? Let me tell you, we are humans, not ants. My angry roaring kept echoing within this space and got louder and louder with each echo. Blizzards blew and the icy mountains seemed to roar, with the icy plains following suit as well. Their anger represented the will of my world, and all the sounds angrily questioned Imrita Lorcan, but he still didn't have one shred of regret in him. As long as you let me live, I will compensate you. I can understand your anger at the loss of your property, but as long as you let me live, I shall compensate you 10 times for what you lost. And, besides, mortals have high rates of reproduction, they'll soon. Yep, in their eyes, mortal humans were just a bunch of ants that could speedily reproduce. Dying for the sake of a god's war was supposed to be the highest form of glory, so what did it matter to them if some mortals died? And, so, I laughed, out of extreme anger. And, so, I swung down my sword. With a flash of light, that venerated head of a god flew through the air. Imrita Lorcan's eyes were still filled with disbelief by the time it hit the ground. I lifted up his head that was currently transforming into nothing but a rock and made a declaration to the entire world. I had fulfilled my own oath. I, Roland Mist, swear that no matter who you are or how venerated your status is, as long as you dare to enter my tribe's land and kill my people, no matter where you hide, I shall find you and kill you. Forgive? Never. Chapter 228. Afterward, Imrita Lorcan's slain had transformed into a pitch-black rock and had started to decay. The other portions encased in eternal ice were too dangerous to even me, so I could only leave his body here. The nightmarish stone giant finally collapsed, and what came along after was a furious wave of the elemental tide. It was wailing, it was singing. Imrita Lorcan has died, this elemental plane has lost its master. The elemental tide was furiously transmitting this message everywhere. Now that the earth elemental plane had lost both its elemental throne and elemental god, it was basically like its story had become completely broken. The earth elemental tide, which always transmitted the earth element to the other plans, now had the earth element begin pouring back inside it, and immense sandstorms began whipping up over the entire plan. This was the final insanity. At the moment that Imrita Lorcan died, every living creature that was semi-god level or above instantly discovered the explosive news that the earth elemental god had died. They also became aware of the fact that this elemental plane was currently searching for a new master. Imrita Lorcan is truly dead? Completely dead? No elemental god had died for far too long. It was impossible to even know who had been the earth elemental god before Imrita Lorcan. All the earth elemental lords that had retreated when the divine sins appeared had been anxiously waiting back at their own bases for news from the battlefield, but they now had blank looks as they accepted the message from their own earth elemental plane. Right after they understood, they were all overjoyed. This enormous mountain on top of my head for tens of thousands of years has finally fallen. It's finally my turn to become the earth elemental god. However, the next news that came right after made all these earth elemental lords not know whether to laugh or cry. The earth elemental throne had been completely destroyed, and the earth element was now pouring in from all the other planes in order to create a new elemental throne. In that case, the new Earth Elemental God would likely have to wait until the new Elemental Throne was finished reviving. Let us stop talking about the Earth Elemental Lords that had complex emotions right now. The ones who were the most unable to accept what happened were probably the Wind Elemental God Cambion and the Water Elemental God Iselos. Mortal enemies always knew each other the best. They knew just how strong Immortal Lorcan was, and when they discovered that Troland, who was only currently a gold rank, actually dared to go engage in single combat against Immortal Lorcan, they inwardly treated Roland as a cocky, overconfident person heading to his death even though they didn't say anything out loud. In their eyes, no matter what achievements I had achieved in the past, they were all mere mortal achievements that would be gone in a flash. The achievements were only temporary glories in the past, nothing but smoke and mirrors to them. While new talents were always eye-catching, only those who remained at the top for the longest were the most respected. In their long lifespans, they had witnessed countless numbers of heroes with astonishing ability and geniuses that could achieve anything, but those that were undying and could actually survive for thousands and tens of thousands of years were actually quite few. To Cambion and Delos, only those who could live to the end were truly worthy of their respect. The Eagle of Glosso? I've heard of him. I think he was famous about 3,000 years ago. What a pity. I think he died of a sudden plague. Sigh, mortals are just too fragile. Whenever I take a nap, several hundred years will have gone by and so many of them will have perished. Cambion and Alos did have their right to be proud of themselves. So many famous heroes and geniuses would die at an even quicker rate than they had become famous. For these ancient elemental gods that were like artifacts, only one type of existence was truly worthy of their respect, those that had also passed the test of time, as well as the strong ones that were able to defeat them. Immortal Lorcan was no piece of cake to deal with. The countless lives that had died to him were the best evidence of this, and both these elemental gods were well aware that any elemental god was basically an unbeatable existence within his or her own elemental plane. They would be able to casually use elemental power as they pleased to endlessly replenish their life power and magic power. Perhaps it was possible to defeat an elemental god in his own plane, but killing one in his home plane was practically impossible. But, the elemental tide that brought the news of Immortal Lorcan's death couldn't possibly be wrong or faked. Immortal Lorcan had not only been defeated, but he had truly died as well. This was far out of their expectations, which made them not know what to do anymore. Although their goal had been to eliminate this bothersome stone giant that was their mortal enemy, no matter how many preparations they made, they still had a tiny voice in their hearts that kept whispering to them, telling them that killing Immortal Lorcan in the Earth Elemental Plane was impossible and that it was fine as long as they didn't lose. As long as we conceal him, no, as long as we heavily injure him and force him to add a few decades to the length of time that he needs to recuperate, that will be enough. From a certain standpoint, Immortal Lorcan, who was able to dominate the other three elemental gods for innumerable of years, was indeed incredible. Perhaps, after all their clashes, the other three elemental gods retained fear in their hearts. It was obvious that this was also the source of why they would never give their fullest when fighting against him. Even though they hated him so much, they would never be willing to be on the front lines and truly fight while risking their lives. To be honest, their fear was no mistake. The fact that I succeeded in killing Immortal Lorcan could not only be attributed to the fact that he just happened to be at his weakest in tens of thousands of years, but the biggest factor of all wasn't even the divine sin Shadow's ice calamity, it was my personal world of frigid winter earth. The Earth Elemental Plane's Earth Elemental God was truly impossible to kill in his own plane. But when he was isolated in another world and was unable to absorb even a single speck of the Earth element, he was in a more pitiful state than even while on the mortal plane. Plus, his greatest support, the Earth Elemental Throne, had already been destroyed. Only with all these factors combined was I able to slay him in my frigid winter earth. I definitely wasn't the only one who noticed that Immortal Lorcan had faked his death. But, I was definitely the only person who intended to truly kill him, and I had prepared so many absolute traps just for that purpose. How did Immortal Lorcan die? How is it possible that he died? Isn't he supposed to be immortal as long as he's within the Earth Elemental Plane? But, the indisputable facts were right in front of them. They had to believe it. After their mortal enemy died, The two elemental gods and the numerous earth elemental lords had only a brief period of joy before a deep feeling of fear seized them. He even has the ability to kill Immortal Lorcan if he was my enemy. From a certain standpoint, there wasn't anything wrong with her fear. This was only a temporary alliance against a mutual enemy to begin with, and now that the mutual enemy had died, of course the alliance would be over. The relationship between us was rather subtle to begin with. Camdion at least had fought together with us in the past, while Aelos had a history of conflict against us back at Allland, and both sides were currently just pretending to be friends now without bringing their enmity out into the open. But, right now, the two elemental gods' reactions were opposite from expected. Camdion's expression was filled with caution, and it was obvious that he was deeply contemplating something anxiously. Meanwhile, Aelos was hesitant for only a short while before she became joyous again. Ren noticed both the elemental gods' reactions. While she didn't allow her expression to reveal anything, she mentally figured everything out. Camdion has large elemental armies and winged tribes under his command. It's highly likely that he has ambitions about the Northlands, and perhaps he's even made some preparations for attacking us already. Meanwhile, Aelos probably thinks that we're sufficiently strong enough, and now has more confidence in us being able to revive her husband's Sidon war. It seems that Brother Roland was correct. The Wind Elemental God is an ambitious one with a luck stat of E, with his ambition far surpassing his actual power. Although Camdion's plan will probably fail in the end, we still need to make extra preparations and be on guard. Rather than Camdion, since we have Sidon war as a sort of hostage, we can't try to get Aelos truly on our side. Ren was smiling sweetly while secretly plotting. A certain princess must have been with two certain black-bellied princes for too long. She was becoming more and more black-bellied herself. Suddenly, a small earthquake interrupted everyone's secret thoughts. A giant sandworm crawled out from underground, and before anyone could attack it, it spat out dragon-colored and green sticky goo all over. Various other chaotic things could also be seen stuck all over the dragon's body. That scene was too beautiful, so in order to prevent anyone from going blind or losing their appetites for dinner, let's just add some mosaics to this scene and press fast forward. Cough. Cough. The moment the dragon landed on the ground, he spat out a bunch of disgusting things. Cough. Cough. I should continue adding mosaics here for all his disgusting vomit as well. Bei Feng Herald, it would seem that you've found an even higher level of how to play around. Give us one reason why we shouldn't destroy you right here for unhumanness. Bei Feng lifted his head up proudly even though everyone was surrounding him with obvious hostile intentions. What are you talking about? I'm the biggest contributor of all in this battle. Even Lord Roland is very grateful to me. If it wasn't for me destroying the elemental throne, who knows who might have won in the end. At hearing this, everyone from the mortal plane was appeased while the two elemental gods also had looks of sudden realization. But what did you guys do? Alright then, in a way, the earth elemental lords were still furious that the elemental throne had been destroyed as none of them could ascend to the position of earth elemental god. Now, Bei Feng was loudly shouting that we were the ones who destroyed the elemental throne. Bei Feng's ability to taunt others was probably now at the point of being able to attract aggro with simply his face. Luckily, there weren't that many earth elemental lords present, and they didn't dare to turn on the strong individuals present here. And, at the same time, Camdion's face reddened completely. All those earth elemental lords were glaring at him with expressions filled with rage and anger that they dared not verbalize. No matter how stupid he may have been, Camdion knew that he had fallen for Roland's plot, but it just happened to be that the situation wasn't in his favor. Just like the earth elemental lords, he didn't dare to start a fight right here and now. While the earth elemental lords were now looking at Camdion in an unfriendly light, they weren't able to take care of the main culprit, Roland, behind this, nor did they dare to turn on the wind elemental god. They figured they would at least beat up the direct destroyer of the elemental throne in order to vent their anger. Wait. Just as the earth elemental lords were intending to have a heart-to-heart talk with Bei Feng, Ren suddenly spoke up and blocked them. Your Highness Ren, you're truly a good person. I apologize for misunderstanding who you really were in the past. I promise that my subordinates will stop spreading scandals about incest between you and Lord Roland. A certain Durkin probably had too much fun playing with the giant sandworms earlier and his brain wasn't working properly yet. He still managed to continue digging his own grave. Oh, it's fine to keep spreading rumors about that. No, in fact, it's better to spread even more rumors about it. If everyone thinks it's true and can accept it, that'll be for the best. Cough, it's just a joke. Apart from Bai Feng, nobody here needs to take it seriously. This time, a certain princess's image was completely shattered, but Trollin wasn't here right now, so there was obviously nobody present who could lecture and control her. Rin cleared her throat and asked the most critical point of all. Cough, cough. I just want to ask, why hasn't Brother Roland come out yet? Could it be that something's happened to him? He said that he still has something else to do, and is also going to spend some time cultivating in this plane. He said not to mind him and return home first. Rin nodded as she glanced at the collapsing temple. Due to Carwin's method of sensing Roland, she knew that Roland was fine and that it was a good time to leave the Earth elemental plane. So, she then immediately retreated on the topic of Bai Feng. Everyone, do as you like. Back where we come from, beating up Bai Feng is a daily occurrence that happens 3 times a day just like eating meals. He has really thick skin, so don't worry that you'll accidentally beat him to death. Alright then. A certain Draken was instantly astounded to hear this and crouched while clutching his head to protect his face. Don't hit my face. I still need to return to my lover. Alright, let's not inquire into how he managed to find a lover in the Earth elemental plane, nor shall I comment upon just what type of existence he hooked up with. At any rate, this common daily life occurrence of eating, sleeping, and beating up Bai Feng was now being reenacted in the Earth elemental plane. To be honest, while the Allied armies outside were indeed ending their temporary friendship just as expected, I actually did have some bothersome things to take care of. It would seem that I would be unable to return to the mortal plane for a while yet. In order to construct a better, more perfected version of frigid winter Earth, I needed a higher quality divine source of Earth element power. Originally, I had planned on using Umrida Lorcan as this excellent source, but now I had an even better one. This is the Earth Elemental Throne? The white crystal seemed plain on the surface, but it emanated continuous waves of mana. However, it was already shattered into pieces. It should be a shard of the Earth Elemental Throne. Your Highness, your frostbite is too serious. Please don't move about too much. This spell array should be able to help with the first step of curing your injuries, but I still recommend that you wait for your injuries to be completely recovered before you continue combining this Earth Elemental Throne shard with your world. I had used too much of my power, which caused Harlois to fall into a deep sleep again. The task that I had originally planned for Harlois could only now be given to my backup candidate. The Hermit Eagle Storm had been secretly preparing the most top-notch of healing spell arrays. As a final insurance, I hadn't sent him to the front lines of battle, but now he became the doctor and supporter for me that I really needed. As an archdruid, controlling the forces of nature and healing were both foundational aspects of his job class. With his presence, I was somewhat able to relax. As for his attempt to convince me to rest, I smiled without answering him. Some things were unable to be said out loud. Was I supposed to tell him that I just received a message from Mayor saying, "Hey, I can only maintain the barrier for 1 more week. If you have anything important left to do, do it fast"? I watched the magic power rapidly diminish from this elemental throne shard and knew that the new elemental throne was definitely absorbing power for its revival. So, I grit my teeth and immediately placed the shard within my world. Now then, let's bring true earth to this frigid soil and help my world evolve. Chapter 229, Abundant Harvest. The empty air and wide open seas were the cradle of life, and in the midst of thunder and gales, the original seeds of life were tossed into the sea. After these young lives matured and evolved to a certain extent, they began going ashore to search for new homes. Of course, that was just the scientific explanation for the origin of the world in my past life. It was the most popular and accepted of all the scientific explanations, but as for whether that was truly the case, nobody knew. As for creationism stories that were fantastical or magical in nature, there were many similarities among them. Every creationism story was largely similar. Among them all, creating humans from dirt was probably the most common factor. In New Zealand's creationism tales, The native tribes believed that a god created humans with a mix of his own blood and red soil. In the Bible, God created the first man Adam using the dirt from the ground, and then created the first woman Eve using Adam's rib. Noah had tossed a stone behind himself after the great flood and his son had appeared. But, the most famous creationism story of all in my former country of China was the Asian tale of Nuwa creating humans by mixing mud and water. In this world, I didn't know if I used a similar method to create life, but since the entire world was crafted using the four elements as the foundation, the lives here were doubtlessly created from the gathering of the elements. And, right now, in my world, that mythical event of creation was being reenacted. The ice mountains and icy plains began to melt, and the thick layers of ice transformed into water. The endless amounts of water transformed into rivers, the rivers gathered into lakes, and the lakes eventually formed into oceans. This was to be a world with water as its foundation, copying the prehistoric version of my past world. Sidon War's ancient god equipment, the ocean bottle, provided the source for the ocean. Blue could be seen everywhere, just like the torrential flood from numerous creation myths. There was no wind, no waves, and not even any sound. Everything was silent, or perhaps I could even describe it as dead silent. No matter which direction I looked in, there was nothing but the ocean. It seemed to be too peaceful. But when the white crystal shard of the elemental throne was added to and combined with my world, the entire ocean started frothing, with countless bubbles arising. Next, tan stone plates started slowly rising from the water, and continental lands that split the oceans finally appeared. Everything was being created in chaos that lacked all order. With evolution and destruction, this land was newly covered in ice and snow again, and this fantastical world of mine was now much closer to reality. The Earth Elemental Throne's shard was just like the mythical dirt and creation tales that could grow by itself with only the nourishment of the wind. It transformed into the foundation to control the seas. As the core of my world, it was continuously creating new continents. Time passed and eons cycled by. The second ice age had now descended upon my world. This time, there were no longer countless layers of ice underneath the endless icy plains. The distant ice mountains and ice rivers also had true earth underneath them now. Since 2 out of 4 pillars necessary for constructing a world had been completed, this world of mine was now moving towards reality from just being an isolated dimension. Previously, I could even see dimensional tears at the edges of my world, but now that the earth element, which was the foundational underlying element of the world, had arrived, the space had finally stabilized. However, I was shocked by this scene. I just wanted to create a small world, so what's with this scene that seems like it's on such a grand scale? Did I unknowingly do something incredible? I could sense that this entire world was related to me. My will could reach anywhere here. It could cause ice rivers to melt, reverse the flow of rivers, or split apart continents, but I instinctively rejected all of this. Don't interfere with this and allow things to evolve naturally. A mysterious will suddenly sounded in my mind, and I felt as if some presence was watching me. I was rather confused and surprised. And then I was actually kicked out. I was actually kicked out of my own world. System notification: you didn't listen when I asked nicely. You forced me to be rough with you. The server is currently under maintenance, and remember to read all patch notes while it's undergoing maintenance. Right now, just go where you're supposed to go. Make sure to get plenty of sunshine, or you're going to have to be careful of growing mushrooms on your head. Alright, I knew that it had to be the work of my shameless system. It was basically calling me a hermit otaku who would die if I saw sunlight, even though I was obviously supposed to be a direct, sunny, exercise-loving boy who all the neighbors praised for being a good man at home and a good employee at work, with friendly relationships with everyone. You actually dare to say that? There are enough people that have suffered because of you to make 2 entire armies. Just now, you were fighting with Immortal Lorcan and deceiving him so that he could fall into your trap. No matter how you look at it, you're the real antagonist. The black cat on my shoulder had woken up from her long sleep, but what was with her commenting on me the instant she woke up? Teacher Harl always, is your value in life to only comment on others' situations now? The server is currently undergoing maintenance. Estimated reopening time, 1.5 months later. System reminder: don't take the server opening time seriously. I'm just saying it casually. Do you know any game server that actually opened up on time? As a longtime gamer who's already become numb from this, you should learn how to optimistically accept a continuous wave of announcements regarding the server opening up later than expected. What? You don't want to accept it? Alright, you can go try playing real life Park against the employees of that game company. As always, I instantly decided to ignore my system. What attracted my attention was instead the numbers that were of the same format as before. Completion rate, percent, fate points, 43,201. The completion rate was actually a question mark. It seemed that even my system didn't know when this would be completed, but judging from the much slower rate at which my fate points vanished compared to last time, I wouldn't be needing to hurry and finish as many quests as I could for points this time. It seems that allowing my world to change itself without forceful interference from me like last time will use fewer fate points. Where did I get all these fate points from? Only now did I finally have some free time to inspect the system notifications that had been piling up, gathering dust in the corner. Congratulations to host for single-handedly slaying Imrudil Lorcan. You have obtained the semi-god equipment during Armlet of the Earth. Semi-god equipment Imrudil Lorcan's Wall of Size, epic level shield, as well as the god level material shard from the Earth Elemental Throne. Since this slaying wasn't a specific quest from the system, no fate points shall be rewarded as per the system's rules. Congratulations to host for single-handedly slaying a true god-level existence. You have now activated the Enemy of the Gods series of achievements. You have now obtained the glorious title of one who loathes the gods, and 50,000 fate points have been rewarded. If you equip this title, you will become a beginner-level enemy of the gods and will receive a 5% damage bonus against all gods. The next step of this series of achievements is to single-handedly slay 3 true gods, which will award you the title Slaughterer of Gods and make you into a mid-level enemy of the gods. You will also receive a 15% damage bonus against all gods, after you single-handedly slay 10 true gods, including one main god. You can reach the peak of this series of achievement, Enemy of all Gods. You'll also receive the title Kratos isn't food for the gods, he's the daddy of the gods, as well as a 50% damage bonus against all gods. However, after you equip this title, all gods will have their friendship levels with you set to 0, and you can't hide this title. You won't be able to stop slaying gods even if you don't want to. 1. Alright then, let us ignore these random comments. It seemed that I did a fairly good job this time. The system indeed rewarded me handsomely this time and was quite helpful as well. Not only did I obtain 2 excellent pieces of equipment, I obtained fate points from slaying Imrudil Lorcan in a circuitous fashion. And as for those Enemy of the Gods achievements, they were the rarest of the rare, titles that seemed incredibly useful. Speaking of usefulness, I suddenly recalled the damned achievements Jinxed and King of all Gentlemen that I couldn't even turn off. The number of gentlemen had been increasing more and more these days, and they were also increasing in shamelessness. Perhaps, this suffering was all the result of my system. But, right now, another trouble was before me. Warning, Sidon War's Ocean Bottle's power level is unstable. Please hurry and complete the quest to hunt down the sea gods and collect sea-related divine power from the sea gods and sea beasts as quickly as possible. This will both complete this god equipment's form for the Revival God quest and help fully construct your world. It seemed that after the Earth Elemental God's body and the Earth Elemental Throne's shard were both absorbed into my frigid winter Earth, the already fragile balance between elements there was once again shattered. Although this was a good thing for my frigid winter Earth world, hunting down the sea beasts and sea gods was probably going to be another bothersome task. What attracted me the most were the 2 equipment that I received. Real life was no game, and not every boss would carry around a large sack of weapons and equipment that he couldn't even use, not to mention dropping a few of the equipment randomly out of a list. For a rather long time now, no matter who I defeated, I hadn't received any equipment. You want equipment from your enemy? Just take it off your enemy's corpse. There was no black hand in real life. What the system could give me was a mess of materials. It merely helped me save time in gathering them. But just glancing at the 2 equipment, I knew what was going on. Roaring Armlet of the Earth, Semi-God Equipment, Effect 1, Power of the Earth, absorb the power of the earth element and increase the strength of the wearer by 10. However, the wearer must be standing on the ground. The strength increase effect will disappear while the wearer is jumping or flying. Effect 2. Indestructible stone. This armlet is indestructible, and can even block God equipment's attacks. If this armlet is significantly damaged, it can even repair itself. Effect 3. Dimensional flash. A short, precise instantaneous transportation. 3 minutes cooldown and the maximum distance is 100 meters. System notification. Using this ability will use up a large amount of stamina. Please use this ability with care. Divine Curse. Petrify. Immortal Lorcan is cursing his enemy that stole his power. Every second, the wearer of this armlet will receive 1 earth damage. If the damage taken from this effect surpasses 70% of the wearer's maximum HP, the wearer will be turned to stone by the endless absorption of the earth element. There is a row of yellow words carved into this armlet. This armlet contains the divine spirit of an undying god. Just touching it can make one sense this god's past strength and unwillingness to die. This gray-black armlet appeared quite ordinary, and the scaly pieces on it resembled Immortal Lorcan's skin. There were also 2 black stones that resembled eyes on top of the armlet. While these eyes seemed to be made of stone, when I touched them, I discovered that they were actually warm and as soft as skin, as if they were living. As a semi-god equipment, its abilities weren't that numerous, but its effects were incredibly useful. All of Immortal Lorcan's strongest abilities were contained within it. Significantly increasing strength was excellent for any melee warrior. Its indestructible quality could overturn a situation at a critical point by blocking 1 attack, and that flash ability was already proven quite powerful by Immortal Lorcan himself. While that divine curse on it was indeed troublesome as it limited the time that this equipment could be used for, since I had a Titan's body and was immune to the damage, I could simply ignore it. It seems that just like that god equipment dagger from before, my system can create strong equipment out of god-level existences using their divine power and divine spirits. Looking at these stats, it's almost as if it was custom made just for me. I joyfully put on the armlet and felt a noticeable increase in my strength, which caused me to laugh out loud in satisfaction. Strength was forever the foundation of any melee combat class, and I've never even heard before of such an equipment that could increase physical power by so much. Perhaps I can finally compare my strength to Amelia's. As for the other epic level shield, it was a tower shield which could cover most of my body. Its shape resembled Immortal Lorcan's face, and there were also stones resembling eyes on it which seemed to be staring at me. It was somewhat pitiful to look at. When I checked out the shield stats, they were similarly practical. Mega high defense combined with the most practical ability of damage reduction, and even an attacking ability that could surprise an opponent. After some consideration, I decided to personally use this shield as well. After all, while fighting with Immortal Lorcan, every time I exchanged blows with him, I was injured to the point of spitting blood. This made me feel like my defense was indeed rather weak if I had to face another opponent on his level. This was such a rare abundant harvest. Did my system change its personality, and it's now going to help me become the main character of a harem story? System reminder: with great power comes great responsibility. The greater your power, the stronger your opponents. The system shall never make any traps for you. You're the one who's digging pits and jumping into them by yourself. Is it the system's fault that you're forever shooting yourself in the foot? Fine then, my expression instantly darkened. This bastard system was making it obvious that it still intended to make me suffer. It couldn't even let me be happy for 2 days. Indeed, it was an abundant harvest. The black cat crouching on my shoulder was laughing in even greater delight than I was, and the next moment, I understood what she meant by that. The black cat reached out her claw and vanished in a spatial distortion. What appeared before me was an incredibly beautiful blonde high elf. Her silky blonde hair was lifted by the wind, and her lightly smiling pretty face seemed to be as pure as snow. Her snow-white skin seemed to have a faint golden glow, and those innocent eyes seemed pure enough to make anyone's heart take and believe that she was as pure as unblemished snow. She was wearing ancient traditional white ceremonial clothing with a long scarf that reached the ground. Her extravagant robes seemed so beautiful that they were holy, and they indisputably added to Harlow's aura of unearthliness. At this moment, the person before me wasn't that banshee who was absolutely shameless and lacked any limits, but rather the last princess of the ancient High Elf Empire. This is a golden High Elf? This is the allure of utmost pureness? As expected of the most beautiful of all elven tribes. At this moment, even my heart skipped a beat. Although I had seen the most seductive succubi before, I'd never witnessed this type of alluring pureness that would make any person easily succumb. It was just like how I had been forcefully sent back to my body where I had died in combat. When Harloise obtained life again, the magic of time helped return her to her past, to that generation where this young female elf had the power of obtaining everything through her charisma alone. When I recalled that inside her was the 1,000-year-old banshee Harloise, I managed to calm down. She smiled ever so sweetly at me, seemingly filled with sincerity. "Thank you so much. I shall remember this debt I owe you." That, however, made me feel dazed and angered. I furiously pointed and shouted at the elven beauty. "You fake! Who the hell are you?" Old witch Harloise would never think anyone. Nor could she possibly smile so sweetly. "Ah, I'm getting goosebumps all over. What manner of demon are you? Hurry up and show your true form." Right then and there, Harloise was so enraged that her eyebrows twitched, but she managed to suppress her anger somehow by taking 2 deep breaths. She forced another smile. "Ha ha, you're such a jokester. Who could I be if not Harloise? You forgot already that I was the last gold elf? This form is how I looked like before I died." Were the ancient gold elves supposed to all be an average of over 2 meters tall? Harloise appeared to have the perfect golden ratio, beautiful and lively with wonderful curves. Yet she seemingly didn't lose her elegance. She also possessed an unscientifically large chest, completely different from any other elf, which far surpassed that of any supermetals. The most ridiculous of all was Harloise's height, however. She had to look down in order to meet my eyes when I was already 1.8 meters tall. Objection. If you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten it. Weren't you still quite young when you died? Who do you think you're fooling? Order for my magical pet. Strip off your disguise. I instantly realized it when she reminded me of her death. She was definitely making this appearance up. She most likely crafted this appearance using her transformation ability. Her magical pet contract with me wasn't cancelled with Harloise's return to life, but it was rather the opposite. Since she had now combined with Shadow, the singular contract now became a dual contract, which actually solidified her connection to me. If I gave her any order at all, she would be forced to carry it out. "Roland, you bastard! This is my expected mature form, don't." The order had already been given to my magical pet, and so, a sudden flash occurred as she was forced to return to her true form. After the light dissipated, the great beauty disappeared to reveal a blonde child elf before me, whose long hair was all tangled on the floor. Her overly large ceremonial clothing was falling off, and her exquisitely small face was filled with anger and was as red as an apple. Even her elf ears that were a symbol of her race were completely red. It was quite interesting. Yep, at least to me, it was very amusing. "Alright, you're flat, flat, and flat. Only this is believable. This is the Harloise that I know." I made comparisons in satisfaction as I walked around her while nodding. I forced her to perform various exercises like lifting her hands up to the sky and windmills to turn around and around, making her furious and embarrassed. When Harloise was dizzy to the point that she lay down listlessly, I lowered my head and looked her in the eyes at ground level, before finishing by patting her head. "Yep, the tall adult Harloise is too unscientific. The short one looks much better. My little friend Harloise, can I interest you in some candy? Caca. Don't bite me." "Hey hey, let go. It hurts, it hurts." "Let go. Are you supposed to be a dog? You bastard lolicon. You're a bastard who deserves to be single forever." A grim voice escaped from her tiny mouth, and she actually managed to even transform her teeth into tiger fangs. "Fine then, let me put everything else aside for the moment, as I first needed to put some effort into removing the gloves on my hand." Note: 1. Kratos appears to be a God of War reference. Chapter 230, Change. Ever since I started becoming slightly famous, people would always put some descriptions in front of my name when mentioning me, such as "damned Roland," "bastard Roland," "why isn't he dead yet Roland," and so on. It seemed that the closer someone was to me, the more they liked to use these types of nicknames. I figured that this was their way of showing their affection for me. I understood that this was a friendly way of showing their closeness to me in an attempt to improve our relationship. After all, calling me Lovely Roland or Wise Roland to my face would be rather embarrassing, which was why they substituted other adjectives instead. Yep, this was just a unique method of expressing the deep friendship between us. It definitely wasn't because my friends objected to me or anything like that, such as the one on my head. Although she was a bit emotional right now, I staunchly believed that she was simply too shy and embarrassed. Isn't that enough? There should be a limit to how embarrassed you can get. I know that you're really grateful to me, so stop acting awkward. I'm bleeding again, stop biting. Hey, did you hear me? Kaka. Kaka. What was it supposed to mean when she transformed her teeth to that size? Did she intend to cosplay as a saber-toothed cat? The transformation ability wasn't supposed to be used that way. Alright then, let us ignore the fact that my head was currently bleeding, as well as ignore the incredibly embarrassed, young elf on my head. At the very least, I had many other important things to take care of. I hadn't lied when I had Beifeng tell the others to go back first without me. For the time being, I wasn't going to be able to leave the Earth Elemental Plane, so I could only have them go ahead first. Even with the Earth Elemental Throne Shard as a converter, my new world still required large amounts of Earth Element for its foundation. And the best quality and highest quantity of Earth Element obtainable was of course in the Earth Elemental Plane. My system had also given me clear notifications regarding this, telling me to stay in the Earth Elemental Plane without going anywhere else. After Immortal Lorcan's death, the connection between planes had already been recovered. A certain shameless death god tossed the responsibility for cutting off the connection between planes to Immortal Lorcan, since nobody would dare to question Ayer about his possible involvement anyways. This matter would likely end just like that. After the connection between planes was re-established, I spent a lot of time dealing with questions from the mortal plane. However, the news that I heard back from them helped me to relax somewhat as well, as the situation in the Northlands was going pretty well. Amelia's new product had already been confirmed to be effective by the Druids, and it was planned to begin planting her new seed everywhere during next month's beginning of spring. My knight's military restructuring work was going smoothly as well, and the Mist Alliance was formally beginning to be put into place. Everything seemed to be developing excellently. Of course, even if most things were going well, it couldn't be helped that there were some chaotic noises mixed within as well. I might as well just tell the truth. I didn't spend all that much time on serious affairs, instead using most of my time to defend myself against those rumors that spread even quicker than dimensional transmissions. The scandal between Prince Roland and the witch had reached its third edition, and judging by the tearing and wall-scratching sounds from the other end of the transmission, a certain demon Marchioness must be rather angry. That was why, until she calmed down at least a little, I should temporarily avoid, cough, I meant I should just cultivate a little longer here for the time being. Since the Northlands didn't have any military affairs that required my attention, most other affairs didn't have too much to do with me personally. However, there was still some news that I paid close attention to. The All-End Empire's plan to recapture their capital has failed, and the city of Rain is continuing to increase in size and area. Large numbers of the sea folk are now constructing defensive fortresses, and even ancient sea beasts have been seen aiding them. The tide and height of the ocean increase every day, and it's looking bad for the humans. All of these were preliminary battles to the holy war started by the elemental gods, but the result was quite different from the one in the Northlands. Judging from the news that I received, the All-End Empire was in a bad situation. The Queen of Storms has actually promoted in rank. Her divine power has gotten stronger. Perhaps it was because the sea folk had gotten more devout in their belief towards their guardian god, or perhaps chaos was rewarding her for her achievements. This female warrior goddess, who was famous for having an inscrutable personality, had gotten stronger through a battle. It seems that gods are indeed the critical point of battles. If Orsai hadn't been killed by Carwins for us, perhaps our straits would be equally dire right now. When I compared the two battles, they were actually quite similar. Both were battles started by a true god on the chaos side, but unlike Orsai, who had caused her premature death with a double betrayal, the Queen of Storms was probably one of the most well-electrizing stars of chaos. From a certain standpoint, She was getting closer and closer to the position of sea god that she dreamed about. Oh man, that's rather troublesome. How perfect. My world also requires sea-related divine power and divine spirits. It seems that we're definitely going to have another chance to meet her again in the future. After all, there were significant grudges between us. The system had even reminded me in the past to not approach the sea, and the Queen of Storms was quite famous for being one to bear grudges. Just having the Borealis stop by the sea for some repairs had caused the Queen of Storms to send annoying sea beasts to attack it, and although we had won that fight, there was now a deeper grudge between us. At the time, I didn't have spare time to deal with her, but now it seemed like I could spare time for her. After all, my two quests where I needed to gather sea-related divine power from the sea gods and sea beasts probably had to go through the Queen of Storms, who had the title of being the leader of all the sea beasts. It's a pity that the All-End Empire views saving face as more important than anything else, which is why they're suffering. Not only did they not request aid from the Church of the Gods, but they even refused to accept aid from the other human kingdoms that volunteered to assist them. As a person who believed in logic and reason, I was utterly unable to understand those who put the concept of face and reputation above all else. However, since the All-End Empire insisted on taking care of their own problem, the other countries and the Church of the Gods indeed had no reason to intervene. What's reputation supposed to be? Can I eat it? Roland missed. I shook my head and put this boring matter to the back of my mind. The other thing that slightly attracted my attention was something akin to a rumor. Congratulations, Roland. Since you defeated Imrita Lorcan, you rose 6 ranks in the Calamity rankings, and you're now number 27. You've actually entered the top 30 so quickly. I was unable to understand why Amelia seemed to be so envious when she informed me of this. Did she think that her ranking wasn't high enough? That being a walking human calamity was fun? I'd scare every little lolly while walking around outside, that would be a sin. Whoops, I seem to have said something wrong. I hate naughty children the most. Harl always. How many times have I said it? I'm really not a lolicon. If you dare to imitate my voice and act as me again, and ruin my reputation, I'll. Yep, the one who just said such a classical Zundir line was the decoration on top of my head. However, she didn't even look in my direction when I threatened her. Instead, she showed an obvious expression of disdain that seemed to say, "What do you think you can even do to me?" After all, if I did truly do anything to her, it would be bad for myself. I'll make you wear an elementary school girl's swimsuit while having cat ears and a cat tail, and I'll make you imitate cat sounds and dog sounds in the middle of Cairo City's largest plaza. Even Harlois was scared witless upon hearing this. It seemed that she never expected even me to be so shameless and come up with this method to threaten her. You do have those types of thoughts about me, after all. For you to be able to come up with such a perverted method of playing around, you still don't even dare to admit that you're lolicon? Fine then. It appeared that my reputation was continually darkening. She was so scared that she instantly transformed back into a black cat, but I was tempted to tease her even more upon seeing such a rare scene. HMPH. You think that I don't have any ways to deal with you if you change into a black cat? Did you forget that Beifeng is still in the Earth elemental plane? Alright then. His name perhaps possessed more magical power than any forbidden spell. Harlois instantly changed back to her lolly elf form and kept shaking her head. Don't turn me into a cat and lock me together with that mega pervert. As long as you don't do that to me, I'll listen to anything you want. That day, wah. It seemed that her memory from when she had just left the underground had given Harlois such a deep impression that she instantly surrendered upon hearing his name. Not only did this give me the perfect way to control her in the future, but it also caused me to inwardly sigh in exclamation at how the name of Beifeng Herald had far surpassed his actual power level in being able to scare someone like Harlois to such a degree. Looking at the current Harlois, I couldn't help but inwardly exclaim. The mental spirit would affect the body, and the body would affect the mental spirit. After Harlois regained her life, she was affected by her physical body that was still rather young. She was now much more emotional than before, and often did some rather silly things. This was a good thing for her. Although she recently did do many silly things, at the very least it made her seem more human. But, right now, I could only hope that her ability in magic hadn't decreased together with her physical body's age. Alright, then help me out here. You're probably the only one who can help me with this. I indeed required Harlow's assistance, and this was something that I absolutely couldn't allow anything to go wrong with. It took me a lot of effort to figure out how to make her obediently work her hardest for me on this. Right now, as one of the main locations where the battle had taken place, the area around the former Earth Elemental Throne had been cleared out and had become a forbidden zone with security patrols. The reason for this was the 7 brothers of the Gourd that were fast asleep in the middle of the forbidden zone. They laid there in all sorts of haphazard sleeping positions, and their snores were as loud as thunderclaps. As true world-level calamity existences, nobody wanted to see them suddenly wake up. Obviously, making them hibernate forever was the safest way to deal with them. But I had promised Rin to help her think of some idea to borrow their power. Impossible. Without even going into if it's possible to summon them to the mortal plane, or considering the huge price that one must pay to summon such a high-level existence, the moment they appear in the mortal plane, there's going to be plenty of fun in store for you. Harlois instantly shot down the insane idea of borrowing power from these divine synths, but I didn't budge. I was well aware of everything she mentioned, but I had other plans. Of course, a complete summoning isn't going to be possible, but how about a partial summoning? Partial summoning? What's that? I've never heard of it, just what are you talking about? For Harlois, who had the wonderful title of being all-knowing, to actually admit to never hearing of this concept, it seemed likely that it didn't exist in the entirety of Ike. Summoning is a connection between two beings. Either the spell fails, or the entire body is summoned. What do you mean by partial summoning? Only summoning half of the body? Harlois was always easily excited about the topic of new magical knowledge. This time was no different. She seemed to have forgotten about how angry she was with me earlier, and was eagerly asking me about this. I directly nodded at hearing Harlois' question. Yep, summoning only part of the body. I ignored Harlois' shocked expression as I began talking about my objective. And as I explained, Harlois' expression changed from shocked disbelief to helplessness. It's such an amusing plan. You're the best at finding abnormal shortcuts. I've never seen you so serious when you were studying magic before. Do you agree that it will work? Although I don't want to admit it, it's highly likely to succeed. Go ahead and try it out. It's impressive how many strange ideas you can come up with. I nodded in satisfaction. Since even Harlois was saying so, then that meant that the rate of success was quite satisfactory. Actually, my plan was quite simple and didn't even require any high-level knowledge. It only required the most basic knowledge about dimensions. First, open up a small dimensional connection through which only one of the Divine Sin's limbs can pass through, and then have Ren wake up the Divine Sin while she's still in the mortal plane. When the Divine Sin wakes up, it will definitely attack everything in front of it instinctively. While that tiny dimensional connection won't allow it to pass through, the dimensional connection will be the only way that it can vent its strength. Then, the enemy on the other end of the dimensional connection will naturally become the target of its wrath, and afterwards, Ren just has to order the Divine Sin to hibernate again, which will basically end this partial summoning. The logic behind it was quite simple, and it was somewhat bending the rules, but it was fine as long as it worked and was practical. After all, even I wasn't confident that I could survive a single attack from a Divine Sin. I've even prepared a name for it already. Look at my golden finger. Golden finger? And I have golden legs. What does that mean? It doesn't seem to fit at all. Then how about the magically appearing divine palm or the 9-yin divine stomps? Why don't you just say that you're an absolute failure at proving that you're a genius at coming up with names? Those are even worse than golden finger.